Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Alright, let me grab my gamepad. And let's just get right into it. Hey everybody, I'm Super Train Station H, autistic gamer and writer, and today we're gonna have a bit of a magazine focused stream, but for the first hour I thought we'd play some Pokemon Puzzle Challenge and Pokemon Pinball. Hey, Clockboy saying happy last Saturday of January. Yeah, it's not all the time that the last stream of the month happens to be on the last day of the month, but it happened this time. And it's, pretty appropriate because I'm starting a new thing where on the last stream of each month, I'm going to read a magazine. So it's 1996 right now. So on the last stream of each month, I'm going to read, so it's January 2026. So I'm going to read magazines from that released or were dated for January 1996 for the 30th anniversary. So it's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to do that throughout the year. And there's a button I want to press, and I don't remember what button it is. Oh yeah, I want to set the timer. Yeah, so for the first hour, we're going to play Pokemon Pinball, but we're actually gonna play it in color this time, and for the first time in a while we've done that. Actually, I don't think I've ever played... Okay, so we'll play for... Actually, no, we'll set this time for 60 minutes. And we'll set my timer I have on my desk that you hear beeping, because I have kitchen timers all over my house for all kinds of different things. And... Alright, we're live. Okay, we are live, but we're rolling in terms of our material. So let's get started. Playing, if anyone's unfamiliar, I'm playing on the Analog Pocket, but of course you don't need fancy equipment like that to play retro games. You just play it in a way that's accessible to you and gives you the experience that you're looking for in experiencing this historical games. And I personally happen to have amassed a large library of original cartridges before that became an expensive proposition. So I know that's not something that's available to everyone, especially these days. And yeah, it's really interesting. I've been playing this game, well, since I started... Well, I first really played this game... The first time I played this game was on my 4-year anniversary stream, which a little did my viewers know at the time was going to end up being the reveal of my VTuber model. But I played it, and I always would play that game in black and white mode, because the cool thing about the Analog Pocket is that it provides a number of options on how to play the games. So if you could, it'll detect, oh, you're playing it on a Game Boy Color, so it'll display in full color, but you can also make it, for games that are cross-compatible between the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, you could have the Analog Pocket, act as though it were an original model Game Boy, and play full color compatible games in black and white, or if technically 4 colors of gray, technically speaking, or 4 colors of pea soup green. And Clackboy in chat is asking if there's going to be another Playdate stream. Not anytime soon, unfortunately, but I definitely have plans for it. It's not something it's not a one-time thing. It'll happen again, especially once we get through Pokemon Red. I have long-term plans, and by springtime this year, you could definitely look forward to me getting into the Super Mario platformers, the 2D Mario platformers, because I played Super Mario Advance on stream within my first year of streaming, the Game Boy Advance remake of Super Mario Bros. 2, and then, in 2022 or 3, I think, I played Super Mario Bros. I got all the way up to World 8-8, and so I want to redo the Super Mario Bros. And actually see if we could beat it. And I have certain parameters in my campaign to... Yeah, darn it. I have certain parameters in my campaign to beat Super Mario Bros., the original. I've beaten the All-Stars version of Super Mario Bros. For the Super NES, but that's not the same, because you have a save feature in that, and you also have infinite continue, so it's a lot easier to get through the end. So I'd like to see if I could actually beat the NES version, but if I can't, we'll move on to the All-Stars version and go ahead and beat that, and then move on to Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3. The I've beaten the Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo versions of Super Mario Bros. 2. I never actually beat Super Mario Bros. 2 on the NES, and I never beat Super Mario Bros. 3 on any system. In fact, there are a lot... I'd say about 70% of the stages of Super Mario Bros. 3, in spite of what a great game it is, and in spite of how much I used to play it back in the day on my NES, I never got past... I'd say about 70% of the stages I've never laid eyes on before, except for maybe I would watch, like, my brother play through some of the final stages of the game when he'd get there with warp whistles. But a lot of the most famous and well-loved worlds of Super Mario Bros. 3, I never actually got to and played myself because, well, I was a lot younger, so I was arguably a lot less experienced with video games. And on top of that, that's not a game with a save feature. Like, once you get to Super Mario World, I beat Super Mario World in, like, 2001 on the Super NES. But I never... but the NES games that did not have 8-bit versions, I never actually beat. So, we'll play the blue table this time. And it's interesting, actually seeing the red and blue tables actually appear red and blue using the in-game graphics. Because when I'm playing through Pokemon Red right now on stream, and for the most part, I'm trying to sort of capture the vibe, the spirit of how I first experienced Pokemon on my original model, DMG 001, the infamous gray brick Game Boy with the 4 shades of green screen. And in that context, I thought it would be more... I wanted to play a Pokemon spin-off, something, you know, for just my Just Chatting opening sections. And I wanted to play Pokemon Pinball, and I thought it would be cool to play it in a way that a lot of people haven't played it, because most people who played this game, who got it back in the day, would have been playing it. Excuse me. Yeah, most people would have been playing it on an original model, on a Game Boy Color, and not on Game Boy. Because even though this game was marketed as a Game Boy Color game, it was not... Game Boy exclusives would say only on... would say Game Boy Color with the little only on in the corner to show that it wasn't Game Boy compatible. But the funny thing is that I guess even games that were backward, like Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, Pokemon Gold and Silver, those were all games that were fully backwards compatible. Well, actually, Link's Awakening DX wasn't fully backwards compatible. There was a special color dungeon that you could only play on a Game Boy Color. But if you played it on an original, on a black and white model Game Boy, you were just playing a re-release of Link's Awakening with some new features added, compatibility with the Game Boy printer and the like. Which the Game Boy printer was not a... that Game Boy printer did not even print in color, so it definitely... doggone. But yeah, so this is the first time I've played this game in color since the one time back in the 90s when I rented it from Blockbuster. Yeah, when it... okay, let's see. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? Come on, I'm being messed with here. Alright, that's cool. It's the 30-second ball save. So we've got our, we won't have to worry about, losing a ball for the next, 30 seconds and change. Oh, okay, yeah, ball save isn't the same as your outlane stopper. The ball save is... the ball just launches without you losing one. What are we trying to do now? What are we trying to do? Oh, we're gonna go to the next city. Let's see. Yeah, but I definitely have plans for the Playdate, and I'll be playing it, but not in the near future. In fact, Mecha Kong did a Playdate stream of his own a few weeks ago, and I have it I've had it open in a tab for the longest, and I need to go ahead... oh, doggone. I need to go ahead and watch him play through the rest of that stream before the VOD expires. But if anyone wants to watch my VODs, I have a playlist on YouTube, and about 80 to 90% of every stream I've ever broadcast on Twitch is preserved there. Most, even pretty big streamers with, hundreds of people watching them do not have as strong content preservation as I have. It's got a little 500 point bonus there, not bad. Okay. Alright, cool. We're still in our little honeymoon period at the start of the ball. Yeah, I want to go ahead and catch the rest of that VOD before it expires, because Mecha played a lot of side-loaded games for the Panic Playdate, and I haven't messed with side-loading yet. The closest I've done to that is using it as an ebook reader with a program. I forgot what it's called, but there's an ebook reader app where you could load PDF. No, not PDFs. You could load text files onto the Playdate and scroll through them using the buttons or the crank. And I actually have used it. I have read I've proofread some of my own material on the Playdate. I've used it as a way to I ended up, during my Playdate stream, I ended up unexpectedly using it to showcase one of my own poems. Thanks, Jinx! Okay, thanks, Pikachu. We're going to catch Jinx, and you might notice that, this is probably one of the last appearances of, the original design for Jinx. Because in, not too long after this, there was controversy in the United States where people interpreted, I don't think it was a lot of people, it was just, I guess, a small number of people with a great deal of influence, interpreted Jinx's design as being a blackface character. Hey there, Mecha Kong. I hope you didn't catch me talking about how I wanted to make sure I caught the rest of your Playdate VOD before it expired. Because I got up to the point where you were playing a sort of arm wrestling game. No, like, it was like some kind of, like, weird, like, edgy-ish wrestling-themed game called Weenus, where, like, you beat someone at, like, pinching their nipples in a wrestling ring, and then their head exploded, and you see their soul leaving their body. I'm like, what the heck is going on in this game? Not really my speed. But, that's the end of this ball. Oh, it's the end of the game. And, actually, no, I didn't. Okay, so actually, what we're gonna do, we're gonna start the red table. Oh, darn it. This is another one of those games that does not actually properly pause, because we need to stop for a moment for our, one of our longtime, community members, the Mecha Kong, has redeemed Sodor lore reading. So we're going to get a minute or two at the most of, oh, excuse me, I have the magazine already up. We need to go to a little lore from the world of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, as written by its original creator, the Reverend Wilbert Awdry, who who published the first Thomas book in 1945, and it actually has very deep world, like, it has genuine, like, Narnia, Lord of the Rings level world building of the island of Sodor going back to the days of the Roman Empire. But, so, the last time we left off, we had a letter here from Sir Handel Brown, who wrote a letter to Mr. Awdry saying that the illustrations in some of his books of his railway were inaccurate. The locations of certain buildings, the setups for certain station track layouts were not fully accurate. So, the Reverend Awdry actually existed as a character within his own lore, as someone who is doing history collection and research on the history of the island of Sodor and its towns and railways. Oh, you know what? Because sorry there, Clackaboy. It looks like Clackaboy redeemed it. Because Mecha Kong waved hi with his doorworm emotes, which everyone can get for following me, and followers are anonymous if you don't want to chat. But anyway, that made it look like you redeemed it if you look in the history of the chat. So we're going to read a little bit about, we're going to read this one page. Oh, there's Reverend Awdry himself, and here's this map of the island of Sodor. I realize it's a little superimposed, a little faded, it looks a little ghostly against the map of, but, Glennock. There was no village here in 1864 when the railway builders came. The only house in sight was a lonely inn, the Glennock, which stood on the Packhorse Trail at a spot where some rough tracks led to a number of farms. The landlord himself, whose father kept the inn before him, does not know for certain why it was given that name. It may be, he says, because in springtime a wealth of wild flowers gives the hill behind us a shimmering blue tinge, or it may be that even the pack horse boys who use the inn as a staging post caught here on their upward journey the first glimpse of Ward Fell, their destination looming blue in the distant haze. The inn certainly stood the old pack-horse trail, but the landlord maintains that the inn was here long before mining began, which was a house of call on an ancient trade route over the hills. For this reason it was important to the scattered lonely farms in the area. When trading travelers arrived, word would be sent that the farmers came to barter produce for goods which the peddlers had to sell. Since in 1864 the inn was the only house in sight, and since according to the survey this would be the approximate halfway point on the railway, a passing loop was laid in called Glennock after the inn. A small platform, a siding, and passenger shelter followed. Subsequently, a sizable hamlet grew up around the station. Cottages were built for railway lengthmen, quarrymen, and found it a convenient place to live. As a result, the station developed differently from the others on the line. Most were unstaffed platforms with a siding and a slate slab shelter. Glennock was the midpoint, where in the early days gravity-operated ore trains traveling down past steam-hauled passengers and empties coming up. Glennock therefore needed resident staff, 4 at first, later reduced to 2, and both the station master and his assistant are seen here on the platform in Four Little Engines, Book 47. So here they're contextualizing, here's where this place appears in the actual Thomas books. The station master and his wife lived on the top floor of the building seen on the platform, with booking office and waiting room below. The waiting room was never used as such, and after a while the station master's wife obtained permission from Sir Handel's father to turn it into a post office and general store. The inn is in front of trees on the left of the picture, while a Wesleyan chapel adjoins the station on the right. Oh, and here you have some various photos. Okay, that'll be enough for now. Alright, so we'll get back to... Alright, let me just grab the analog pocket and drop it back on the dock. Alright, so thank you, Kalakaboy, for redeeming your XLO tokens. Please wake up. I'm trying to wake up. Okay, I got it. Alright. Alright, there we go. Alright, somehow I accidentally turned off the system entirely, which I did not mean to do. But we're gonna play. Yeah, sorry for the mistaken identity and who had actually redeemed the Sodor lore reading. But, you know, this is... Between the main... Think of the games I've been playing lately. I've been playing Panic Playdate, and since 2024, 2 calendar years ago, I've been playing Pokemon and Pokemon Pinball and various Game Boy games. So to see a full-color game is kind of like, wow, it looks so vivid and vibrant. And Kalakaboy in chat is asking about the new Thomas the Tank Engine television series that's coming out later this year. Me personally, I'm just like, whatever. Like, if it makes the kids today happy, I'm all for it. If it keeps the Thomas franchise alive, fine. But I think, like I was saying this about the first 5, because when I was a kid, I grew up with the first 4 seasons of Thomas. I watched about half of Chapter 5 on home video after I was kind of done with Thomas, just to see, like, what are the newer episodes like. But then Hit Entertainment took it over, and I was really done with Thomas at that point. I was still passionate for the original source material, the Railway series books by the Audrey family, and for the the connections to real-life railroading history that exist in the Railway series. But as far as, like, being a fan of Modern Thomas, I really was nothing. I was not a fan in any way, shape, or form. Especially as the years went on, the series became more and more unrealistic, more and more fantastic. And I know that might seem weird. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about Thomas the Tank Engine being realistic? And as you might have seen, if those of you saw the Sodor lore reading just now, the world of the island of Sodor is a world that's very much rooted in our own Earth. Like, when you look at the original books, it's not a magical land, such as it were. It's a very real world. It is a otherwise completely realistic world in which the machines talk and have feelings. And aside from that, it is completely realistic. There's no magic. Like Thomas and the Magic Railroad, where you're jumping between, like, where Sodor is a fantasy world that exists in a parallel dimension to the regular everyday world. That is the furthest possible interpretation of Thomas when you actually look at the original vision of the of Reverend Audrey, which was to have stories rooted of stories about railroads based on actual industrial activity, based on realistic and accurate railroading practices, but that had the locomotives as memorable characters using aspects of how these machines work, and to tell memorable stories that sometimes contained morals and sometimes were just for fun, you know, using the trains as characters. But the world was very much a real world. Like, if you look at the first 4 series, the first 4 seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine, you're looking at a world that, if you covered up, if you ignored the face, if you put the trains, the show on mute in those first 4 seasons of Thomas, if you put those episodes on mute and ignored the narration and ignored the faces, what you're watching is a completely realistic railroad operating as a railroad would. Because you have to remember, at the time Reverend Audrey was writing these original books, there's nothing special or unique or novel about steam locomotives. That was just how railroads were operated back then. And so by the time you get Britt Allcroft and David Mitten starting their model-based series of adaptations of the Reverend and Christopher Audrey stories, Thomas is a British franchise. Steam operations on the mainline British railroads had ended in 1968. So by the time 84, you have 20-ish years that have passed between the end of steam and the children who were watching television at that time. Why would kids be interested in obsolete industrial equipment if there was not some element of realism that reflected the world they saw around them, and if the characters were not memorable and they were telling stories that were worth telling and worth being engaged in for not only the kids, but the parents who either had to read the old storybooks or had to supervise their kids as they watched television. And if Mattel these days is having a tough time, the previous iteration of Thomas, which was Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, if they were having a hard time selling toys based on that, then they have to realize, and I think they may have, that if you want kids to watch this show and want to buy toy trains, you need to make a show that's actually about trains and railroading. Because, especially in All Engines Go, I understand there's a bit of a renaissance where even fans of the original, 1980s and 90s episodes really felt that there was a resurgence in respect for the source material and in somewhat more realistic railroading practices being reflected in the television show, but then it got more and more focused on gimmicks like Thomas going around the world and introducing I guess what are meant to be, such as it were, ethnically diverse characters in the form of Nia, who could be a perfectly fine character. I just feel like the way they were handled is just kind of questionable. Why does the first African locomotive character introduced in Thomas have to have sort of archetypal African textile patterns painted on her, when that's not how actual steam locomotives in Africa during the steam era were painted? And if you want to get into the history of the use of railroads in Africa and their role in by imperialist occupying forces in suppressing the local populations, it gets pretty not kid-friendly pretty fast. But that's a whole other that's a whole other can of worms I don't want to open right now. But what I will say is that especially with the last several years, the version of Thomas, this sort of 2D cell animated, well, not cell animated, this 2D sort of like flash animated looking thing called Thomas and Friends All Engines Go. Well, it wasn't a show about railroad. I never watched a full episode of it, but from the few clips I've seen, it was absolutely not a show about railroads and trains. It was about arbitrarily train-shaped creatures. And at the very least, it looks like this is going to, at the very least, be closer to the 3D animated Thomas series that ended in like 2018 or whenever it, or 2020 or whenever it was. I think it was like 2020. I think that or 2019 when the original Thomas series, which spanned from the model series back in 1984 all the way to the newer CG series, ending with, I think the season was called Thomas Big World Big Adventures. And all that being said, I just hope that if they make a show that keeps the franchise alive and has more respect for the source material and the subject matter, and it maybe even gets some kids to have a lifelong love of railroading and trains and steam engines, then I will be fine for it. But I'm not a fan of Modern Thomas. I'm not a fan of... I'm not going to... If modern kids enjoy what they're putting out, and it keeps Thomas alive and gets kids to get interested and look up, where did this start? Where did this come from? And learn about the Railway series and the original books by Reverend Audrey and their connection to real-life railroading history, then that'll be great. But like I said when they first revealed Thomas All Engines Go, is that this may keep kids distracted and keep them entertained momentarily, but it will not make people lifelong lovers of railroading. And the original Railway series books by Reverend Audrey and his son Christopher Audrey inspired generation, and the television shows based on those stories inspired generations of people who will be lifelong enthusiasts of railroading and railroading history. And the Thomas they've been making the last few years, I think, had very little no kid, I think very few kids are going to watch Thomas and Friends All Engines Go and end up having a lifelong love for trains. And I could see myself having enjoyed Thomas All Engines Go as a kid, but I watched the original Thomas as a kid, and you see me reading, detailed books, aimed at adults, about the Reverend Audrey's lore and all the history and world building and research he did. And in fact, Christopher Audrey's book that he wrote about 20 years ago, Sodor, Reading Between the Lines, I think it was called, that he reissued, finally did a reprint of that book, and that had been long out of print. The book I've been reading, that book was completely, that book's been out of print for above and beyond 30 years, and I understand the copyrights for that book are in sort of like ownership hell, where it's split between, it's somehow split between the Audrey family, Mattel, and I think and some other parties as well, and then I think the original publisher of the books. It's a big mess. And unfortunately, the Audrey family, they have I think they have the rights to write about the setting that the stuff, they have the rights to write about and expand upon the original books, but they can't publish or write original material in a way that infringes on the rights held by Mattel. So it's a very complicated and messy thing where unfortunately the Audrey family doesn't have the right to just hey, okay, Mattel, you do your own thing, but we're gonna work with someone else and do an independent series. No, that's not going to be the case. And we're still maybe 30 or 40 years away from the original Railway. I think in the 2040s, we're 20-ish years away from the original Railway series books potentially becoming candidates for entering the public domain, at least by US standards. I'm not sure about UK standards, so because that gets pretty messy pretty fast. But I'll say this: if we make it to 2045 and there's still people around or if we make it to the point where the original Railway Series books enter public domain and there are people around who are able to like do adaptations and derivative works based on that, I think we'll be doing pretty well for ourselves. And a Galactic in chat is saying that they're sure if their kids buy their parents that toy train sets, it might help foster an appreciation for trains. Well, I'll tell you what. The Unlucky Tug, who is kind of is a YouTuber, the Unlucky Tug, who is sort of my window into. He does a lot of coverage of Thomas, both modern and like vintage. And he's kind of my window into whatever news is going on with modern Thomas. And he's showed a lot of photographs he's taken of toy store shelves and stores like Target and the like, where the Thomas toys, based on Thomas and Friends All Engines Go, are just sitting on shelves. But the displays that have Thomas toys based on the older series, that have more realistic trains with more realistic proportions, relatively speaking, those are typically like nearly sold out. And there's no way that there's a pretty big adult Thomas fandom, just like there's an adult, My Little Pony fandom. But there's no way in heck there are enough adult Thomas fans buying toys in stores to make all the older Thomas trains like sell out, and all the Thomas toys sell out, while the ones based on the more cartoony, less realistic designs happen to be like sitting on store shelves. All right, we'll go ahead and save, and we'll swap games at this point. Yeah, so either parents who grew up with the older Thomas are getting the older Thomas toys for their kids, or toys based on the older Thomas property, the older incarnations of Thomas they're more familiar with, or the kids are more attracted to the Thomas toys based on the older franchises, as opposed to, oh, doggone. Alright. It's the first time I booted this cartridge up in a while. This is part of the magic of working with original hardware. Oh, come on. Alright. Yes, I did do the thing. Okay. I did the forbidden thing, because I don't have any. Usually I do have alcohol and Q-tips nearby, but not this time. Hey, it works. Great. Okay. And all right, we'll play. All right. So this is Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. This came out. You know what? I just noticed something weird. Well, actually, let's let the intro play, because we haven't seen the intro to this in a while. Alright. Yeah, it's very interesting that there is not a copyright date on the title screen. Usually these games will always have a copyright date on the title screen. And under certain old copyright laws, if you forgot to put a copyright date on at the beginning of your movie, it would instantly enter public domain. That's how Night of the Living Dead entered public domain status so rapidly. Marathon challenge. Yeah, let's play Marathon. We'll start on the easiest setting and move on. And we'll play a Cyndaquil, because he's cute. Okay. We have a bunch of Pokemon we haven't even unlocked yet. Yeah, we've played a lot of... You know what? The last time I played this game was definitely in the midst of... Yeah, it was during the, I guess, Season 1 of Super Train Station H and Friends, if you want to call it that. And nice, our first combo! Okay. Yeah, it was during Season 1 of the Super Train Station H lore. which if you're unfamiliar with, you can catch up on there. I'm out of character this time around, but my stream does have lore, and the cool thing, I think, is that my lore unfolds in real time during my streams, like during my gameplay streams, so you actually get to see the story developments, like, interspersed with the gameplay and other things I do, which, I haven't seen a lot of streamers do. Like, a lot of times, like, the lore will just be sort of something they'll put on their about page, or something like that. I do know, Harbus, who is an evil mana-fox that likes to turn humans into foxes. He mentioned on his stream lately that he'd like to do sort of what he'd called a sort of a little digital puppet show that explains some of his lore. And I don't know, and it sounds like something in the far future if they end up ever doing that, but that's something I definitely want to see, because I have heard like lots of VTubers. I know VTuber Senpai on YouTube. He's done a lot of videos about VTubers in particular, streamers and VTubers in particular, getting really bent up on I need cool lore to, you know, to attract viewers. And he's like, okay, when does that lore actually like play into like your personality and your presentation of your material is going to be more important, and most of the time the lore really doesn't matter to the viewers much. It might inform some of the theming for your emotes and things like that, or some of your backdrops, but it's never, very seldom do I see it really, or have heard of it really playing out. Now, that being said, I don't watch, like, I know lore is kind of a thing that's kind of standard for a lot of agency VTubers, especially in the more like anime-centric sphere, and I don't know if, I know sometimes I think the lore might be a little deeper sometimes with those types of streamers, but I've never seen or heard of like the lore actually taking place live on stream. So, I know one of my viewers kind of compared it to what I've done with my lore to Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where the conceit is that you have this fictional character, Space Ghost, and like all the characters from like the Space Ghost cartoon that are like out of character and doing a daytime talk show where you have like real life personalities that they're interviewing, and the conceit that all these silly things are happening, like different characters show up and interrupt or sabotage the interviews and things like that. And so I had different like characters that they're not like AIs. Like I'm not interacting with AIs. But they are text-to-speech characters who, within my universe, are meant to be artificial intelligence constructs that are constantly calling me and giving me advice and interfering with me and, like, disrupting my games and things like that. So I had fun doing that, so I hope if Harbus ever goes ahead and does what they call like a puppet show kind of thing, I hope they have a lot of fun with it. Because I know, yeah, there's so much, like, I feel like there's a lot of storytelling creativity. I mean, even if what I'm doing right now, I never really thought of it this way until recently. It's really kind of an offshoot both of animation and of puppetry. And there's so much potential for storytelling. And the funny thing is, I guess most of my lore as it's unfolded, like, on stream to this point, most of it took place with me as, you know, in front of my webcam. You know, I'm using a webcam to, you know, capture my motion control and everything. But, in terms of, like, just me actually, you know, in my apartment, you know, just as myself, and not as the Lunarian H character, I mean, it's just, like, regular human H, aka Super Train Station H of Redemption Center 1. It was actually done with me in front of a webcam, you know, and Lunarian H here is like a separate, simultaneously existing character to human H, and I want to see if, you know, I have plans to resume that storyline and explore, you know, I have so much I've written, but because of the complexity of those streams, I have to write, I have to rehearse, and it takes a lot of behind-the-scenes production, and then on top of all that, it's just a regular gameplay stream. So if I wanted to make a stream just like this one, where I, play games and talk about what I'm playing, talk about what my other hobbies, what I'm up to, what I'm doing, and have these plot progression elements, it'll take a stream that might take an hour or two of preparation to being a stream that will take, like, maybe 5 to 6 to 8 hours of preparation and preparing materials and writing and proofreading and rehearsing, because I am, like, acting live in real time to a script. Yeah, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast, so I wanted to focus on my gameplay for now. And once I move into my new apartment, which I'll have a bit more space to work in, I want to get into other things, which will include, hobbies I want to get into. Like, I want to have a hydroponic herb garden in my apartment. I'm really excited about that, in the future, because when I have a bigger apartment, an actual kitchen, you do some more cooking and things like that. And I also look forward to getting into VR, because this model I'm using it's work I'd have to pay someone to do, but this can be rigged and prepared to operate in VR, which will be really exciting. Yeah, so we'll be having the full Ready Player One experience on my chat. And I guess it's something that I would explore, like, independently off-stream, as well as maybe do, like, streams, because I've seen all kinds of cool stuff in VR. Like, virtual art museums, hangout spaces, all kinds of cool stuff. And it'll be really exciting to be able to actually be able to interact in that kind of setting. And I know, just not to use Harvest as an example of everything, but I know Harvest does, like, VR hangouts with his community, like, on most weeks. And, just be able to do things like that. I know you don't need... if I wanted to... Like, you don't need a fancy custom model to get into being a VTuber or a PNG tuber or whatever. But for what I personally wanted to do with... Like, I've been Lunarian H, this character right here. He's been kind of a mascot, kind of window dressing for my stream since 2020 when I started. It wasn't until I further developed ideas of Lunarian H as a separate, simultaneously existing character from, like, actual real-life me that I became interested in actually using Lunarian H as a, motion capture VTuber avatar, and being able to tell stories using that I couldn't using, myself, just only myself in front of a webcam. And for those same reasons, if I wanted to get into VR, I'd want to do it using, personal, using this avatar, or Griffin H, which is another, this, I'm Super Train Station H, this is Lunarian H, of Redemption Center 5, mind you. There's also Griffin H, who is of Redemption Center 2. There's a Redemption Center 0 H as well, but he has some very interesting lore implications that I don't want to spoil, but that's something you can look forward to in the future. And then there are certain games that... Oh, and Clackaboy is saying that it was a magical time when my ongoing lore was being revealed stream by stream. Aw, thank you. It was a lot of work. It really was. It was not easy, but and mind you, and if anyone's unfamiliar with this, I kind of sprung this on my audience without warning. So all of a sudden, like, there's these weird, like, characters with creepy voices. Like, I use text-to-speech, but I don't... All the text-to-speech voices I use are, like, weird or distorted. Like, they're deliberately made such as that someone... Like, I always... Like, I know, like, nowadays we have, like, AI text-to-speech, and you could, if you want, make a voice that sounds very much like an actual human actor. And I'm not into that. Because the thing is, I conceptualized the other characters, aside from the different versions of Super Train Station H himself, like the different AI characters that are represented via text-to-speech, they're characters that I always intended to be text-to-speech since before, like ultra-realistic AI-powered text-to-speech that is, like, unfortunately replacing, like, paid, voiceover work for talented voice actors became a thing. So the fact that I was making and so I wanted to make characters. Okay, how could I have text-to-speech, because I couldn't afford actors. Relying on my friends to play certain actors and be available at certain times wasn't reliable. So I'm like, okay, how could I find a way to use text-to-speech and have those obviously fake voices, like, not clash with the, I guess, with the fabric of the storytelling? And the answer very quickly became, like, have the characters be actual, like, be robots. Be synthesized voices being used by computer programs to interact with, the on-screen character that I'm portraying. So that's how we got characters like the Advanced Controller of the Great Currency, and, we have, all these characters have super grandiose, like, self-important names. We have the Advanced Controller of the Great Currency, it was sort of the main secondary character, who's also kind of the villain of the series. We have, 40 Line, the non-binary being with a binary mind. We have, Red Hot Boiling Detective Chad, which is actually, like, my own that's a voice, that's, like, my own voice. Like, Red Hot Boiling Detective Chad is really just me, talking like a stereotypical old-timey detective. And so there's Red Hot Boiling Detective Chad, the Advanced Controller of the Currency, 40 Line, and other characters as well. And I look forward to bringing them all back, as well as having Lunarian H, me, fully in characters, Lunarian H, Super Train Station H, Lunarian of Redemption Center 5, as well as catch up on the lore of the currently missing. Yes, he's currently missing in an Eldritch negative dimension. Super Train Station H, Human of Redemption Center 1, portrayed by just me in front of a webcam. It was just as being myself. Yeah, I was sent to an evil like a sort of backrooms type negative dimension by the Advanced Controller in the season finale, which involved the reveal of Lunarian H, the parallel universe H, discovering that there's a human parallel universe version of him. At some point, and when I do that, I'm gonna have a marathon where I replay all my lore streams and then go into, like, my new stuff. It's gonna be fun. Okay. Wow, I'm still playing. Jeez, I've been playing for a good 15 minutes. I didn't think I'd be playing this long. I still haven't zeroed out. But I did play on easy mode. I did play on a mode specifically intended to let me turn my brain off and just go ahead and keep playing and matching bricks. And this is one of those games, Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. This is one of those games that I looked forward to but never actually got to play. I never actually owned a version of it until I downloaded this game on the Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console. Yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah, on the 3DS Virtual Console, I got a copy of this game. And this is one of those games that I really did daydream about, like, oh man, I'm gonna save up, I'm gonna get this game, and it's gonna be so cool. I'm gonna play it while I wait for the bus. It's gonna be so neat. Yeah, back when frequent bus rides were a part of my day-to-day life. But, okay. Bam! Nice. Okay. Yeah, I didn't have time to set up any... Now, the interesting thing about this game right here is that it actually I believe this game... Well, I know for a fact. This game... Okay, finally we're picking up the pace with the difficulty here. It was getting a little too easy for a minute at first, but there we go. Got that nice combo going. Yeah, this game started as a Game Boy... Like a black and white Game Boy... I guess a non-Game Boy Color adaptation of Pokemon... No, of Panel de Pon. and I guess it got, at some point the development got, like, canceled, and Intelligent Systems was instead asked to make a Pokemon-themed Panel de Pon game in the form of this right here. And the funny thing about this is, like, Panel de Pon, the original form of this series as Panel de Pon was Japan exclusive. It got localized, and it featured these little magical girl fairy characters in a fantasy world. Nice, okay. But I guess Nintendo of America decided, rightfully so, frankly, that that would not be very marketable in the United States, so they they had Intelligent Systems rework the game. Here we go, nice combo, nice! Had Intelligent Systems rework the game to feature imagery and theming from the then fairly recent Yoshi's Island for Super Nintendo. And they also did a Game Boy version they rethemed it to Yoshi's Island and renamed it Tetris Attack. Now, at the time, it was good marketing to, I guess, tie in with Tetris, which was, like, the most popular puzzle game around at that point. But unfortunately, the fact that Nintendo did that made it impossible for them to ever re-release the Super Nintendo version of Panel de Pon featuring Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo. Whereas if they called it, like, Yoshi's Panel Panic or something like that, they would have been able to re-release it. Now, they did release I believe they released the Japanese Game Boy version of Tetris Attack, which was called Yoshi's Panapon, because that didn't have any Tetris branding in it. And because they made up, I don't know if Intelligent Systems, I think Intelligent Systems and Nintendo Software Technology made Pokemon Puzzle League for Nintendo 64. And for some reason, I want to think that it was based on a unreleased or unfinished prototype, or it was originally planned to be I guess an N64 entry in the Panel de Pon series featuring those characters, and they kind of expanded on that and made a fully fledged, like, independent, like, released game out of it. And the GameCube Nintendo Puzzle Pack or something, that was a Japan-exclusive puzzle game that had Dr. Mario, Yoshi's Cookie, and Panel de Pon, themed around the original Panel de Pon characters. There we go. But because of Pokemon Puzzle League in particular, whereas in Japan this series was always called Panel de Pon or Panapon, because of Pokemon Puzzle League, Nintendo, I guess, decided to just make the official name of this series Puzzle League in English-speaking countries. So, and that really kind of started with the Game Boy Advance. They had a release of called Puzzle League and Dr. Mario very late in the Game Boy Advance's lifespan, where you had Dr. Mario and a completely unthemed, unbranded version of Panel de Pon that didn't feature any characters from any other franchise or even the original Panel de Pon Fairy Girl characters. And I guess they just decided to call it Puzzle League in English-speaking countries because of Pokemon Puzzle League. But now you have this weird thing where the entire franchise outside of Japan has the name Puzzle League, which was originally given to the game Pokemon Puzzle League to tie in with the idea of the Pokemon League from the actual Pokemon, like, main RPGs and anime. And what I find interesting is that when you look at Pokemon Puzzle League on N64 and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine on the Sega Genesis, in both cases we have North America exclusive spin-offs of an existing game, with Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine being a spin-off of Sonic the Hedgehog, and Pokemon Puzzle League being a spin-off of Pokemon. But in both of those cases, those games aren't spin-offs of the games. They are tie-ins with the television animated series based on the games. So it's a game based on the cartoon that was It's a game based on the cartoon, based on the game. So you have a lot of, in both Sonic, Sonic with Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Pokemon with Pokemon Puzzle League, you have a lot of television exclusive elements and set pieces and characters and lore appearing in those games. Whereas with Pokemon Puzzle Challenge here, this game was actually based on Pokemon Gold and Silver, as opposed to Pokemon Puzzle League, which was based on the Pokemon anime. And this game actually did come out in Japan, whereas Pokemon Puzzle League was a Japan exclusive. It was a North America exclusive. So this game is actually based on the original Pokemon games, whereas Pokemon Puzzle League is based on the anime. So it's kind of a weird shared history between Sonic and Pokemon of having puzzle game spin-offs based on the animated television series adaptations of those games. Okay, can we keep this going for another 6 minutes? Can we? I don't... Alright. And, oh! Okay, good. Okay, we're good. We're gonna make it. Okay, let me just pause for a second. Need a little break. Alright. There we go. And we drop right in there. And with these green ones, now that looked attractive, but there's really not much of an opportunity to... There we go. Yeah! We did it! Okay. That was dope. I saw that combo coming. I'm like, can I make this work in time? Yeah, I wasn't able to switch those over in time. Yeah, but this music, in this game in particular, something about this music reminds me very strongly of, like, Sega Game Gear music. And another game for Game Boy Advance, which is kind of interesting because, you know, Game Boy Advance is a 32-bit system. Nice. Bam! They got that combo going. Yeah, I'm just spotting all the combos and just using them to bam! Got a 4 there. No, doggone. Okay, I did not react fast enough to get the combo I intended. Yeah, we did it. Okay. And we get these purple ones together. Yeah, there we go. We went from nearly zeroing out to clearing the board. And we're at speed level 40 already. Okay. Alright. So if we set these, bam. And get these. Okay, I just need a few seconds to... Okay, got that chain there. Okay. Got that going. Oh, I wasn't able to do it fast enough to make a combo out of that. But I can see these purple ones, I can get a 4 here. Bam. Move the star over, and yeah, nice. Okay. Alright, and drop those. And yeah, we know we're doing good when I'm not able to talk that much, but I did to talk about something as complicated as possible while trying to maintain. Oh, okay, come on. All right, we got 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Can we survive long enough through to the end of our first section of the stream? I'm going to take a little break, a little stretch break, a little refill my water bottle break, and we'll get into the gaming magazines. Oh, that's not what I planned on happening. Okay. We'll roll with it. We'll roll with it. Okay. There we go. You can very clearly tell which combos are accidental and which ones I planned out in advance. Oh, okay. At least we can get a normal match out of that. There we go. Nice. I didn't really think I had enough time to shuffle over those hearts, so just went ahead and got the match while I had the chance to do so. Get that 6 right there. Alright, we want to move this over. No! Doggone, that is not what I planned to happen at all. They kind of ruined my combo. Alright. Yeah, you gotta love when a block comes up from beneath you. And got that 4 chain right there. Get that 6. Get those triangles out. Alright, that's not what I intended to happen, but it didn't really destroy my plans. Oh, okay. Alright, alright. Okay, those, I'm kind of in panic mode, but, oh, yes. Okay. And, oh, man. Woohoo! This is quite a, okay. Alright. We're doing good. We're doing good. Alright. Drop this here, shuffle this star over, match those 3 there. That's not the block I intended to drop, but got a different, yeah, if it takes longer to actually set up a combo that would give me more time, it's just like I'm not like getting ahead, so to speak. Alright, and let's do it. That's a game. Okay? We could top out with honor and dignity. Because we finished, let's see, we got 29 2s, 2 3s, 1 4 chain. Alright. Look at all that, Did we get a high score on this cartridge? Best combo 7, best chain times 4. Alright, well, if we didn't, alright, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break, but I want to give you a hint at what's coming up next. So, coming up next on Super Train Station H, we're gonna be, reading some vintage gaming magazines. We're gonna be, oh yeah, there's Reverend Audrey. Yeah, they recreated his study at the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum at Towyn in Wales, but yeah, we're going to be reading this, we're going to be starting with bonus issue 1996, January, issue 80 of Nintendo Power. Happy New Year 1996, for the 30-year anniversary. We're going to be, actually, why is this so little? I can make this, there we go. That's a little better. Yeah. So, hush. Yep, but for now we're gonna take a 5-minute break so I could stretch, refill my water bottle, and do whatever else I need to do, and so rest my voice a minute, stretch, do some exercises, and I hope for this to be a stream that goes on to around 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So I'll see you. There we go. Oops. Yeah, I guess we could get rid of the Pokemon logo for now. And the, yeah, so I'll be back in, where's the time, where's my, okay, I just looked for my timer program on the computer, okay. Alright, yeah, I meant to go to a different break screen, but this works well enough. It's not playing the same music I would have otherwise been playing, but... Alright. Alright, And I'm also going to run a break screen so that I'm going to run an ad break so that the ad breaks don't interrupt our actual content. So I'll see you all in a few minutes, and thanks for watching, and we'll come back for some vintage gaming magazines. Hey, I'm back. And I thought I had a break screen that didn't have the Pokemon music playing, but it really doesn't matter that much. It's just something to lighten the mood a bit. But I'm going to, hold on. Yeah, I activated the ad break so it won't interrupt our stream. And here we go. So, yep, it is the last day of January in 2026. So we're going to read a magazine from January 1996, a magazine dated 30 years ago. So realistically, this is kind of more of a December issue. Like, the dates didn't really closely, because they had to have time to edit and ship things out, so like the actual dates weren't always like one-to-one with yeah. Hold on. I just gotta set everything, everything up for the magazine. Alright. We've got to alright. And okay, there we go. We're gonna be good for now. Alright, so to begin the January 1996 Nintendo Power, Happy New Year, NU. NU standing for Nintendo Ultra, as the N64 was characterized at that time. So you have the prototype controller with that more shallow dish D-pad. That sort of disc around the D-pad. They ended up around the control stick, that shallow disc control stick. The circle around the D-pad. That early beta screenshots of we have a screenshot here of the first Zelda tech demo. We have Pilot Wings, and I believe this is Wave Race 64, and an early screenshot of Mario 64. And those early, yeah, you see more of the early. No, we're scrolling past that. We're not even going to acknowledge what that was. Okay, my instinct when I see certain things is to click right off of it. Hey there, Azurest, how you doing? Actually, we are going to make this a little wider. Yeah, that's more like it. And, yep, so we finished the gameplay. I don't know if you got to see, we played Pokemon Pinball in color for the first time, and Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. And we're done with gameplay for this stream. The rest of this is all just going to be magazine stuff, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But in about an hour... Oh, well, look at this. This is interesting. Look at this. I guess they had to make this in-house or something to make this, like, sort of crude... like 3D rendered representation of the Nintendo 64 controller. I never saw that before. So that's interesting. The Nintendo 64 debuts. It's funny, they're saying Nintendo 64. Like here, they're calling it Nintendo Ultra 64. You've seen the system and the controller. Now check out the stunning games for the Nintendo Ultra 64. But they're calling it already Nintendo 64 for short, and that's what they ended up calling the final system. But, responses, we're going to read some of the letters to the editor. Responses for our request for dream game ideas continue to come thick and fast. Lots of readers want Zelda, Final Fantasy, Earthbound, and Super Metroid sequels. Yeah, Final Fantasy. Don't hold your breath on that one. It's going to be arguably... not until nowadays, and like 30 years later, with the re-release of Final Fantasy. Yeah, I don't think not until the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake on the Nintendo Switch 2 has Nintendo actually gotten a full-fledged, like, proper Final Fantasy entry released on a Nintendo system. And Azure is saying they can't text on their other phone. They saw most of the first segment. Okay, great. All right, because they got a lot of great discussion that I'm glad you got to at least hear. I've got a great idea for a game based on a movie. It stars Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia. It's called Street Fighter. It's action-packed and... Wait, never mind. My hero, me. A game should be made going through the inside of a Super NES, NES, Virtual Boy, or Game Boy. Around every chip you would face the biggest and slimiest villains from all the top games. On top of that, it could be 3D. The goal of my dream game is to find a problem in the system like a repair guy or gal would. On the way through the system, you could find wrenches and other tools. The hero is me, because I think most Nintendo Power readers would love to be in a game. That's a cute idea. Alternate universe. I have always thought an interesting game would be an alternate video game universe. The basic idea is to create a game in which characters from one game are trapped in another and have to make their way back to the real video game world in which they belong. Yeah, they could... That was basically the premise. We got something kind of close to that with the Smash Brothers series, and they explicitly made that the plot of a major theatrical release in the form of Wreck-It Ralph. So I wonder if this person ever got to see Wreck-It Ralph. Dave Della Vecchia of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, back when they used to pretty much dox everyone who wrote into them. So we have power charts, the Super NES top 20. So January 1996, we're still having top 20 lists of the top Super NES games. A top 10, Virtual Boy top 5. This is like... That feels like kind of an... Virtual Boy deserves so much better than what it actually got. Gee whiz. Alright. Now this is interesting because we have... Yeah, editors... No, just the fact that in this window right here, they used the interface from the old Macintosh operating system. So it's kind of interesting that they decided to use that imagery rather than... Shows you they might have been editing this on a Macintosh back then. Yeah, so it's interesting. First thing we've got is gameplay coverage of Earthworm Jim. So immediately having Yeah, I never played these Earthworm Jim games. I know there are a lot of these games that were kind of like, benignly edgy, like games like Earthworm Jim and Boogerman and Clay Fighter. But here we go. Now this should be interesting. We've got Out of the Shadows. Nintendo 64 debuts in Japan. We got a closer look at this prototype Nintendo 64 controller. I feel like these gaps are a lot wider between the three prongs of the controller than the final unit. Yeah, the dish, like the thumbstick has a shallow dish on it instead of those ridges. And the D-pad here, like the circle around it looks a little different. But you've heard about it, the light at the end of the tunnel. The debut of the Nintendo 64 in Japan appeared more like a supernova exploding in your face. Everything we wanted, everything we hoped to find, everything we dreamed about in the ultimate video game system was shown at the Shoshinkai Space World show. Yeah, this was at the point where they were starting to call Shoshinkai a Space World, which was a Nintendo-only trade show. It was basically like an E3 where Nintendo had the entire convention space. And the last one of those they ever did was in 2001, which was, interestingly enough, the same Space World where the first footage of Legend of Zelda, what became Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, was revealed. And it was not received very well and was highly controversial in ways that arguably are only within the last few years have been widely, challenged. But yeah, it was definitely highly controversial at the time, but revealed, and by the way, important note here, if anyone wants to say that Wind Waker was not controversial, that's kind of proving that it was controversial. Yeah, if a lot of people say it's controversial and you say no, it wasn't controversial, then like that kind of just proves it was controversial. But revealed in all its glory for the first time, the Nintendo 64, Japan, the Nintendo 64, Japan's version of the Nintendo Ultra 64, debuted at Shoshinkai Space World. You know what? This is the first time I've seen that styling. Japan's version of the Ultra 64. So, it was when this system was announced, there was Project Reality. It was the original, like, 93 press release, I think. But, yeah, it was called Ultra 64, or Nintendo Ultra 64. Then, as far as the history as I knew it, then it just, at some point before release, got renamed Nintendo 64, and they dropped the Ultra. But here they're saying that, quote, the Nintendo 64, Japan's version of the Nintendo Ultra 64, like there was a phase in which they were planning to call it Nintendo 64 in Japan only, and call it the Ultra 64 outside of Japan? That's very interesting. Now, debuted at Space World over Thanksgiving weekend 1995 to a dazzled international audience. Now that's interesting. Over Thanksgiving weekend. So I know by the time of Space World 2001, that took place in August. And here it took place later in the year in Thanksgiving 1995 to a dazzled international audience. The first playable game, tentatively called Super Mario 64, showcased the vast potential of the 64-bit system. Yeah, for a long time they were trying to sell they were pretty, like, I guess, cautious of using it Mario 64 as the final names. They'd always say Mario 64 tentative title. But a Nintendo Power source brought you the first photos and news live online from the show. In this article, Nintendo Power goes in depth, revealing all of the details available for the Nintendo 64 and the 13 games demonstrated at the show. We also go behind the scenes with Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka of EAD, Entertainment Analysis and Development, better known as the brain trust of Nintendo's premier game development group. In addition to that, we have exclusive information on the Nintendo 64 disk drive. Oh, yeah, that thing. Yeah, we'll talk about that. What I'll say for now is that if Nintendo wanted this disk drive to be an important part of the system, they needed to build it into the system to begin with. But, plus the rundown of the best Super Famicom, Virtual Boy, and Game Boy titles that also debuted at Shoshinkai. But first, a little background. Shoshinkai is an annual exhibition sponsored by the distributors of Nintendo products in Japan. Although it is similar to CES or E3 here, the show is always limited to Nintendo products. Wow, I guess I didn't need to explain it in that. I'm glad I explained it in exactly the same way Nintendo themselves explained it, because this is the first time I've ever seen such a detailed explanation of what Space World was from Nintendo themselves. Traditionally, Shoshinkai has been the forum Nintendo has used for introducing new products. The show is attended by distributors, developers, third-party publishers, and press from around the world. Following the one-day Shoshinkai event, the giant convention hall in Makuhari turns into a circus. Oh, this is new to me. So, it turns into a circus called Space World, which is open to the public. Thousands of excited gamers stream out of the KO Line trains from Tokyo to spend a day or two with the latest Nintendo games. For gamers, during these 3 days of Shoshinkai and Space World, this is the only place to be in the world. I never saw a distinction being made between Shoshinkai and Space World, because by the time I was by the late 90s, early 2000s, Space World was used as a phrase for the entire event. I never saw this is the first time I'm seeing the specification that Shoshinkai was the trade show that was intended by like industry people who were working with Nintendo and press covering it, and then Space World was the public event at which like people could come and play the games and experience the demos. Here, in one dense paragraph, you'll find all the essential sound bites you'll need to impress your friends and dismay Sega and Sony owners about the Nintendo 64 and Shoshinkai. Okay, so this is very interesting. In this pre-internet world, they're basically making a press release. They're basically creating a press kit for kids to go to the playground or the school bus and brag to their friends who own other systems about why Nintendo 64 is the hot new future of gaming, and to wait a little longer till the N64 hits the market instead of getting PlayStation or Saturn. They're basically, so Byte 1. Mr. Yamauchi, president of Nintendo Company Limited, announced in his speech that the Nintendo 64 would be released in Japan on April 21st at a price of 25,000 yen. Byte 2. In a teleconference on the following day, Howard Lincoln, chairman of Nintendo of America, confirmed that the NU64, they're not calling it the N64, they're calling it the new 64. Because I guess they're not using the N64 branding outside of Japan at this point, confirmed that the Nintendo Ultra 64 would sell under $250 when it released in the US. Now, of course, at this point saying under $250, they're meaning 25, they're meaning $249.99. But of course, they ended up slashing the price by $50 to launch at $199, and basically using that extra $50 to let people buy the game of their choice, usually Mario 64. Let's be real here, because this is the first Nintendo system in the US that was not bundled with another game. But Byte 3. 13 games were demonstrated at the show, including 2 playable demos. Highlights of 11 of the games appeared only on looping videotapes, but even in these sneak peeks, held some wondrous images. Byte 4. A memory card for the controller was revealed for the first time. Although the final memory size of the card has not been determined at the time of the show, its function was clear. Using the memory card, which will be sold separately, you could save a game in progress and continue play on any Nintendo 64. Really, more specifically, any Nintendo 64 and on any copy of that game. Because, in reality, it was mostly used by third-party developers that were too cheap to pay to put battery saves in their games. I'm looking at you, Konami. But really, it was kind of more meant to be an ancillary feature where you could save, in a racing game, you could save a custom race, a custom car to your memory card, then play it on your friend's copy of the game when you're playing 4 players against each other. Little things like that. Now, Byte 5, Mr. Yamauchi announced that the read and write drive accessory for Nintendo 64 would debut in 1996 at Shoshinkai, and that one of the first games would be The Legend of Zelda 64, another temporary name. Yeah, the idea that they thought Zelda Ocarina of Time would come out in late 1996 for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. No, it ended up coming out in 1998 as a cartridge release. Though there was 64 disk drive compatibility, residually retained within the game in anticipation of them potentially releasing the N64DD expansions later on, but that ended up not happening. And the stuff that was in the 64, that was going to be added through the 64 disk drive, ended up being released. Parts of it were released as Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Master Quest, and other parts were adapted into Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, a completely separate game. Up until the opening of the doors on Friday, November 24th at the Makuhari Convention Hall in Chiba, Japan, the Nintendo 64 was an enigmatic box symbolizing the hopes and fears of gamers around the world. Everyone hoped that once it opened, it would be as incredible as Nintendo promised, but not everyone was convinced that a $250 video game system could live up to the hype. The machine incorporated some of the most advanced computer technology, MIPS 64-bit RISC CPU, SGI, Reality Co-processor, RAM bus DRAM. The specs looked awesome, but specs can be manipulated, and competitors may try to put their own spin on the specs, making people question their importance. What was missing to define the hardware was a game, something you could actually play on the Nintendo 64, a game that would leave its competition back in the dark ages of 32-bit architecture. That game turned out to be the biggest surprise in Nintendo history and the best kept secret. Rumor had it that Shigeru Miyamoto was working on a Mario game, but hardly anyone outside of Nintendo had a clue as to the kind of game that was in development in Kyoto. They wondered how Nintendo would make use of the power of Nintendo 64. As it turns out, that was entirely the wrong question. The truth is that the game Mario 64 shaped the Nintendo 64 hardware more than the hardware shaped the game. In a candid discussion with Nintendo Power, Shigeru Miyamoto revealed that he began thinking about Mario 64 5 years ago during the initial 3D work on Star Fox. And the shape of his new game sharpened his imagination. The need for better hardware to run such a game became apparent, and the seeds for the Nintendo 64 were sown. The beauty of this approach to developing software and hardware jointly is that it is a synthesis of creative and technical talent. An engineer might know how to get a graphics processor to perform miracles, but only the game designers and artists can tell him which miracles are worth performing. That's a really elegant way of sort of framing the approach Nintendo took to developing their hardware and software. Sort of have the engineering of the hardware and the artistry of the game design sort of cohabitating within the creative process of developing the hardware. The defining contribution of Super Mario 64 may not be that it drove the development of the N64, but that it has created a new type of game as distinctive as platform games, but infinitely more variable and realistic. In a single brilliant stroke, Miyamoto and his team created a new standard. Previous games such as Doom, Myst, and Alone in the Dark just scratched the surface of 3D gaming environments. Either you blasted everything in sight, solved abstruse puzzles, or did a combination of both. In Super Mario 64, Mario roams freely throughout an interactive environment, discovering wonderful places and dangerous enemies. Imagine the richness of a Yoshi's Island game play... Okay, excuse me. Let me read this. I tried to read what I was expecting to see, because not what actually was on the page. Imagine the richness of Yoshi's Island gameplay. Yeah, because what I want to see is the richness of Yoshi's Island's gameplay, because the game would be Yoshi's Island. And so the gameplay of Yoshi's Island would be Yoshi's Island's gameplay, but instead they sort of form it as Yoshi's Island gameplay. It's not incorrect, it's just sort of counterintuitive, not quite what I was expecting, I was expecting them to phrase it. But in the most impressive 3D world ever for a video game, and you'll get at least some idea of what Super Mario 64 has to offer. Recently, hold on. I have to go back up here. Recently, video game critics have been wondering if game development will ever move on from standard platform action tournament fighters and first-person perspective shooters. The answer now is that it has. And Azra's chat saying, yeah, it's kind of said sideways a bit. Made me cock my head like a confused dog a bit. But the controller. Super Mario 64's contribution to the development of the Nintendo 64 didn't stop with setting requirements for 3D graphics and high-speed computing power, as it also dictated that a special new controller would have to be created. It should come as no great surprise that the Nintendo 64 controller feels as though it were made for Super Mario 64. It was. Control of Mario has never been so precise, and Mario has never before had so many abilities to help him combat Koopa's plots of Mushroom Kingdom domination. Yeah, notice they call him Koopa and not Bowser. This was, yeah, starting with Mario 64, they consistently actually described the character as Bowser, but in America he was more typically styled as King Koopa. Plots of Mushroom Kingdom domination. The world's favorite plumber has added climbing moves, aerial flips, and a helicopter spin to his athletic repertoire. Their most impressive moves come from the use of the Nintendo 64's 360-degree analog control stick. How do you run in Super Mario 64? Press the control stick as far as it goes in the direction you want Mario to run. Off he scampers, but if you want Mario to edge slowly forward, move the control stick a short way in that direction, and he'll cautiously put a toe out. It's so simple that businessmen who never play video games were hooked instantly by the action. I really love the fact that they're just explaining as a novel concept the basic principle of controlling a character in a three-dimensional environment filled with enemies and obstacles as a novel concept that has to be like manually explained how this new type of game is going to work. So in addition to the cool control stick, 10 buttons on the Nintendo 64 controller offer a range of play control. The 4 buttons on the right side of the controller have been dubbed the C buttons. In Super Mario 64, the C buttons control camera movement. Each C button, up, down, left, or right, switches the camera perspective. In a 3D world, you can lose your character behind objects if you just follow along behind. Games like Crash Bandicoot solve that by having the camera just take place in a corridor behind the character. By swinging the camera perspective to the side or above, or by zooming out, you could regain visual contact of your hero in time to avert disaster. The left and right triggers on either side of the controller work like the left and right buttons on the Super NES. The large A and B buttons control main functions such as jumping and throwing objects. Depending on the game, these buttons may have multiple functions. For instance, in Super Mario 64, Mario can helicopter spin if you push the A button while he's in the air. The start button is basically the same as any start button. The Z trigger is hidden beneath the controller, but is one of the coolest new features of the unit. It can be used for firing weapons, activating motions, or other options as designated by the programmer. As for the cross pad on the left side of the controller, Shigeru Miyamoto concedes that it is there in part in case people don't feel comfortable with the control stick, though it can be used for other functions. Since the Nintendo 64 console has 4 built-in controller ports, multiplayer games should be a mainstay of the system. An additional port in the back of the console can accommodate a 5th controller or another AI input-output device. There was never a... That's like using like an expansion port for an additional controller is something that they did on the Famicom, the Japanese equivalent to the NES. But I think that expansion port was removed on the final retail version of the system. All that was on the back of the system in the final retail version is the where you plug in the power and where you plug in the AV. But now check this out here. This is very interesting. So we've got the main controller set up here that most games, especially 3D games, would use. You have your right thumb on the A and B button and the C buttons with your right index finger on the R trigger. Your left hand on the middle prong with your thumb on the analog stick with access to the start button, and your index finger being able to use the Z trigger beneath it. Then you have, I skipped one intentionally. Then we have this setup here, where you have your right hand on the action buttons and your left hand on the D-pad. Lots of the different 2D platformers use this setup. And here we have this, which is something that was depicted in the N64 manual. But as far as I'm aware, it was never ever used by an actual game, where you have your left hand on the D-pad and your right hand on the analog stick. And the only buttons you would have access to in this position would be the right shoulder trigger and the Z button. And as far as I'm aware, no games actually use that setup. Alright, so here we go. Now we have write-up of the disk drive. We have this caption: the most impressive moves come from the use of 360-degree control stick. During his speech at Shoshinkai, Mr. Yamauchi described the need for a high-speed, mass-volume memory device without the limitations of CD-ROM. ROM, he explained, means read-only memory. All it can do is read data. But what if you had a storage medium that allowed you to write in data? With such a device, you can make an entirely new kind of game. That new kind of game will debut this fall when the first games debut at the next Shoshinkai. But Nintendo Power can now reveal the first details of the new magnetic disk system. The 64DD, as it's being called at this time, makes use of a high-density magnetic disk capable of holding 64 megabytes of information, or about 8 times the amount of data that cartridge-based Nintendo 64 games regularly will hold. The seek time of the drive averages to 150 milliseconds compared to about 212 milliseconds for one of the newest 6-speed CD-ROMs, or 320 milliseconds for double-speed CD-ROMs. The lower the number, the faster the seek time. Data transfer speed on the DD is approximately 1 megabyte per second. A 6-speed CD-ROM only manages 900 kilobytes per second, while the common double-speed CD-ROM pokes along at about 300 kilobytes per second. But by far the most significant fact about the 64DD is that it can be written to, not just read from. Uses may include customization of games, creativity programs such as 3D Mario Paint, and means to download games and programs from network or satellite sources. Yeah, they talk about downloading games from satellites. That's something that the Super Famicom, the Japanese equivalent of the Super NES, was actually actively doing at this time in Japan. And interestingly enough, there are rumors right now, I don't know how credible they are, if it happens, that's nice, that games that were exclusively released as part of the satellite broadcast system for Super Famicom may release on Nintendo Switch Online for the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2, which is very exciting. But the flexibility of the system is great, is its greatest strength, making it the perfect complementary device for the ultimate game machine. I mean, come on, ultimate means final, nothing greater than. If it's the ultimate game machine, it shouldn't need a $100 to $200 extra, like, sub-console. And I know I've said this in my last stream, but I feel like Nintendo was in a place where, like, if you think of the Famicom disk system for the Famicom, the Japanese equivalent of the NES, that was a magnetic disc add-on for the Famicom that redefined the system's lifespan, and for a couple of years, most of the major releases on Famicom were coming out as disc exclusives. Not the case in Japan, because that's not the case outside of Japan, rather. But we're in a world where Nintendo's barely a decade out from having a floppy disk add-on, a magnetic disk add-on for their first console be a major success and an important part of the system's lifespan. So they're planning from the beginning for the N64 to have its own, like, more advanced floppy disk add-on, and also to compete with some of the disadvantages the cartridge format has compared to the CDs on PlayStation and Saturn, which, while they did have very long load times, especially by modern standards, they did have the space for CD quality audio and for full motion video cutscenes that were, the Nintendo 64's cartridges did not have the space to hold that kind of enough data to have those pre-rendered cutscenes and the CD quality audio. So let's look here at this feature, the Game Guys. Nintendo Power sat down with Shigeru Miyamoto and Takeshi Tezuka for an hour and a half during the show. Over that time, the two creative giants talked about their involvement with Super Mario 64, the N64 hardware, and future projects. They also revealed some of their philosophy of game design and often outrageous sources for new game elements. And doggone, this is 30 years ago. They look the same now. These people look the same now, especially Mr. Miyamoto. Now, most gamers instantly recognize the name of Miyamoto. The creator of the Mario and Zelda games is the most venerated figure in the history of video game world. But for all his fame, he continues to be one of the most personable men in the industry. Relaxed, humorous, but thoughtful, and always open to ideas. In fact, after answering our string of questions, Mr. Miyamoto piled us with his own questions about American gamers. He is intensely interested in what the Americans want in games. That's very interesting. They was asking the Nintendo Power people, and mind you, unlike other parts of the world that had Nintendo, like officially licensed Nintendo magazines in their countries or regions, Nintendo Power Magazine was the only one of these that was actually produced like in-house by Nintendo's like regional subdivision, and was actually operated and written and edited by Nintendo of America employees. So Takashi Tezuka might not be as well known as Miyamoto, but his work shows much the same type of genius and attention to detail. On Yoshi's Island, Tezuka had the hands-on control as director of the game's development, while Miyamoto managed the larger issues as producer. For Super Mario 64, those roles were reversed. The two men will also work together on the Legend of Zelda 64. Okay, here we go. Power, short for Nintendo Power. When did you begin work on Super Mario 64? Miyamoto says, I first had the idea to do a 3D Mario game when I was working on Star Fox. That was 5 years ago. I had always wanted to do that a game that recreated an entire world in miniature. I like miniature trains. When I saw what could be done with 3D modeling on the Star Fox game, I knew we could do much more. Mario 64, as you see it at Shoshinkai, is about 50% complete, but only about 20% mapped out. We have worked on this game for a year and a half, but design work for the game concept began a year before that. During that time, we shared ideas with the hardware design people. Mr. Miyamoto later pointed out that an early development of any game takes a great deal more time than the final production. And asked if the game would be completed by April. They said they would be finished in plenty of time. Now, I want to look up something real quick. I want to search this on my phone, so excuse me for looking down for a moment. Okay, development of Super Mario 64 began on September 7th, 1994 at Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division and concluded on May 20th, 1996. And we know that because the original documents leaked from Nintendo in about 2020. So we know the exact date. It was September 7th, 1994 that development on Mario 64 officially began in any formal way at Nintendo. So, man, that's amazing to think about. So, let me think. So, September 1994. So, around this time, we're having games like Donkey Kong. Around the time Donkey Kong Country came out. Around the time, September. The PlayStation came out in Japan in, December 1994. So, just give you a sense of what was going on at that time. So Nintendo Power asks, do you find that game ideas drive new technology, or is it the opposite? Tezuka says, hardware technology is very important, but if we rely too much on the hardware and not enough on ideas, you won't make games. You'll have demonstration software. New technology can make things more interesting. For example, the Nintendo 64 can produce advanced images, but if that's all we emphasize, the game will be boring. The problem we face is how to use advanced technology to enhance gameplay. The technology is just a tool for the expression of ideas. Is there a philosophy that guides your game development? And Nintendo Power asks, Miyamoto says, in Super Mario 64, I wanted to include more details. The ideas we use in the game come from real life, but they may not seem so. In the process of and by the way, this is the first time I'm reading this, so this is actually new thoughts from Miyamoto to me. In the process of including an idea in a game, we often change it many times before reaching the final version. For instance, during the development of Mario 64, Mr. Tezuka got an idea about putting his wife in the game. His wife is very quiet normally, but one day she exploded, maddened by all the time she spent at work. In the game, there is now a character who shrinks when Mario looks at it, but when Mario turns away, it will grow large and menacing. This is the image he got from his wife, and we thought it would be great in the game. I actually have heard this story before, and I understand that to be the story of how the boos were created. Yeah, so I think there might have been a translation gap here, where somehow they thought that the development of boos was I don't know, it's just an interesting translation gap here. But I believe that story dates back to the development of Super Mario Bros. 3. Power. How does your wife feel about this? Tezuka with a knowing shrug. She knows. She knows. Tezuka, Power. What is the most important thing you could achieve with the Nintendo 64? And Miyamoto says, before, in earlier games, we couldn't show the entire game world in detail and we couldn't convey all the emotions of the characters. Now we can do that on the Nintendo 64. I've always wanted to create realistic experiences, full experiences such as you and I could have, but in exciting worlds. Nintendo Power asks, how will The Legend of Zelda 64 and other games make use of the 64DD? Miyamoto says, it's too early to say much about the Zelda game except that Mr. Tezuka and I will be working on it right after we've finished Super Mario 64. Right now it's only a demonstration, but it gives the read-write disc but the read-write disc in general terms gives us the ability to create software tools that the player can use. For instance, games such as Mario Paint or SimCity, these can be customized and saved. We might make a 3D painting system like Mario Paint but in 3D. Some games could change backgrounds and other elements. You could also back up games. The 3D stick gives you such good control that you don't need a mouse. Does the 64DD turn the 64 and the N64 into sort of a PC? And it's interesting that they want the Legend of Zelda 64, as it's being called at this point, to be the headline game for the 64DD, because back on the Famicom, about a decade earlier, The Legend of Zelda was not a cartridge release in Japan. It released as a Famicom Disk System floppy disk game. And I say floppy disk, it is a bespoke magnetic disk format. It's the same tech as a floppy disk. But it actually, Legend of Zelda released as a disc, and it had load times, believe it or not. And I guess they want to try to recreate that lightning in a bottle moment where the Legend of Zelda on NES helped launch the Famicom Disk System and have Zelda 64 launch the 64DD. And Miyamoto says, on the question of if the 64DD turns the N64 into sort of a PC, Miyamoto says, we think that the N64 will be better in every respect than PCs. We were plug and play long before the PC market ever heard of such a thing, and since we use a TV monitor for display, we don't need extra hardware for running movies and such things. And Nintendo Power asks, people still ask, why not use CD-ROM? And Tezuka says, for games, you need backup and flexibility. CD-ROM doesn't have that, but the 64DD will. We aren't making movies, so we have chosen the disk system instead of a CD-ROM. And Nintendo Power asks, did you help design the controller too? Miyamoto says, design of the controller began at the start of the process to create the Nintendo 64. We knew that we wanted characters to be able to move in the 3D world in certain ways, and determined that the controller had to be had to be able to do. And that determined what the controller had to be able to do. So yes, we were involved from a gaming point of view. How much of the game is finished? About 20% of the mapping has been completed. About 50% of the game is ready. Currently, we have 32 courses. 32 courses in Mario 64. But the final version may have more, maybe 40 courses. That doesn't include bonus areas, of course. They aren't giving anything away yet. I think there are like 15 levels in Mario 64. How many? I'm typing this on my phone. How many levels are in Mario 64? Mario 64 has 15 numbered main courses. And they're saying here that in November of 1996, that they had 32 courses ready, and the final version will have up to 40. Yeah, they were extremely ambitious and optimistic as to how many levels they'd be able to put in the game. Because here they say they have 32 courses, and the final game had less than half of that, and they aren't even counting bonus areas, which I guess would include places like the Princess's Secret Slide and the like. Now, Nintendo Power is saying, what can you tell us about Mario Kart 64R, which ended up just being called Mario Kart 64? Miyamoto says, many improvements over the Famicom version. We didn't want to show the game here, though, because the improvements in gameplay have not all been added yet. It looks very good, but doesn't play much better than the original so far. That will come when it is finished. You'll have many new options, more items, excellent control. They're saying we aren't making movies, so we've chosen the disc 64DD system instead of the CD-ROM. 4-player modes, including a ghost mode, and maybe 4-player battle mode, which I would like very much. Yeah, and the thing is, Azure Rest, and Mecha Kong. Do we know what the R stands for? I'm guessing. There's a Japanese word, that starts with an R, that I believe, I don't know, I don't want, hold on. I don't know the word. I can't think close enough to be able to search it and have it correct me to what it is. But it's I believe there's a Japanese word that starts with the letter R when spelled out using the Roman alphabet. That means enhanced or improved or deluxe or something like that. And Azure Rest is saying that maybe they melded the courses. And you know what? And this is very interesting because, like I said, we know because of the leaked documents and files from Nintendo from 2020, that we now know the exact day in September 7th, 1994, that development started on Mario 64. So we have actually obtained a lot of unfinished and in development levels that would have existed as part of Mario 64 at the time this interview was conducted. And I think there might be a total of maybe 5 or 6 additional levels, and they are all extremely rudimentary. They're just giant, test areas to sort of, test Mario's movements. But they did actually contain, if you look in the code of the final Mario 64 cartridge, you could find, references to games that basically, if the levels of Mario 64 were houses on a street, you could find places where they demolished the houses but left the addresses in the local directory. So you have phone numbers to houses that were demolished. So it's we could see that there was a level here and there that was deleted, and we don't know what they are. And we actually found the levels that correspond to those, and they're mostly very incomplete, very rudimentary sort of test kind of environments. And so maybe some of those elements were adapted into the final levels, because Mario 64 in particular is very famous for the extreme deviations between the game as it was originally shown around the time this interview took place and the final version of the game as it released. And there's a lot of, I guess, folklore, urban folklore that was developing around 2016, 17, 18 or so about there being, like, I guess, a brainwave scanning technology in the cartridge that subtly adapted the Mario 64 game to each person playing it. So each person might see slightly different things than other people who played the game. And a lot of, like, lore and sort of, like, kind of borderline horror type folklore developed around Mario 64 based on all these missing levels and lost elements and, like, apparitions of characters like Wario who never appeared in the final game. And around the height of the... And there's, like, this specific level that was said to have what they called a negative emotional aura. And what it was just really amazing, because at the height of this, of all this sort of folklore and world building around, you know, people, you know, finding, like, having sort of supernatural experiences with memories of this Mario 64 game that were different than other games, than other people who played the game, the original development data for this game leaked, and we obtained a lot of material that kind of coincided with a lot of the fake videos people were making of alleged beta versions of Mario 64. It was very fascinating. But, yeah, so... in Mario 64... So what is your role in the development of games such as Pilot Wing 64 and... Boogie Boogie 64? Huh? I never heard of that. Boogie Boogie 64. I've never heard of that. That's either a game that got a significant... That can't be Beetle Adventure Racing, because I'm thinking of a car that would be called a buggy, like a, you know, like a Volkswagen Beetle. Boogie Buggy 64. That game, Beetle Adventure Racing came out years later. So it either got a name change or it got canceled. Miyamoto said, "We're working together with some of the finest artists and programmers in the world on these games. My role is to..." Oh, okay, Mecha Kong in chat is saying it was a canceled racing game. It's not the Volkswagen Beetle game that came out later on. I watched so many videos. I've watched, like, hours-long documentaries about N64 and early versions of games and canceled Nintendo games. I've never heard of Buggy Boogie 64. And hey there, Bill. Hey, Bill Preston in chat is saying that he's quoting from some source. The game was described as a DNA-based driving game. In the game, your vehicle would destroy others, then morph and gain some of that vehicle's powers. Hey, indie developers, that idea's up for grabs. It certainly sounds interesting. And if they want to talk about, like, DNA in terms of, like, melding different traits and characteristics of vehicles, I think a modern system would be much more able to develop on that. And Azrest in chat saying, this is a very informative magazine. Yeah, I'm very glad I chose to read this. I honestly I intended to spend 1 hour with each of these magazines. And instead, it looks like we have only 6 more minutes before our next in-stream break. And we're not even 25% of the way through this Nintendo Power issue. Because we also have a Game Pro and an EGM, also covering early Nintendo 64. It's possible that we may have covered this magazine early, like among one of my first, like, 10 or 15 streams. But no, this is a fantastic. I did not expect to be learning as much as I am, not only from the magazine, but to my community as well. I love you guys. Thank you so much. I thank you all so much. Okay. Now, okay, let me pull up There we go. So, my role is to oversee the project and direct it where I feel it should go if I see something lacking. I have great respect for their technical capabilities as they have respect for my abilities to create games. It's a very good combination. It is more removed from the role I have on Mario 64 where I'm close to the game, but I'm very happy with the results we've seen. So here we have, if you remember, I haven't played Mario 60. When I played Mario 64 on the Wii U Virtual Console back in 2020, it's the first time I played that game, the N64 version of that game, since 1997, 98 or so. By the time you get to 1999, I'm kind of done with Mario 64 and moved on to other games. So I really, but if you these screens, even like at the time I was first playing Mario 64, back in, you know, when the N64 was a brand new system. So because I was very interested by how different these screenshots here looked from the final game. Like the lives counter is very different, the star counter, the coin counter, the penguin here is very different. So we've got Super Mario 64. Now this is gonna, like, this area here, like these three screenshots are, well, like this screenshot is an early version of the second world of the game, Whomp's Fortress, but this is going to be very interesting to read. Years from now, gamers will look back on Super Mario 64 as one of the games that defines a new era of gaming. They absolutely hit the nail on the head with that one. This is the giant leap in game evolution that Nintendo has promised for the Nintendo 64. The reason why people will want to buy a new video game system. What sort of game is it? It can't be defined in terms of previous games, but has taken elements from throughout the rich history of video games. It is a free-form 3D adventure with power-ups, real-time fighting, brain teasers, and mazes, exploration and story elements, plus a wonderful mix of play modes and bonuses, which is all you expect from a Mario game and then some. Wrap it in the finest 3D graphics ever seen for a video game, and you have something extraordinary, exceeding even the finest arcade games. So much for the glowing tribute. What you want to really know is, what is it like? What's in it? And what makes it different? In a word, Super Mario 64 is fun. You get to do things with a character that you've never done before. For instance, you could hide behind things. In one area filled with booze, Mario could jump into a tree, rattling the branches as he lands, and hide. You could circle around objects, looking at them from different sides, and since this is a Mario game, you may discover that things are not what they seem. A hill is an entrance to a new world. A stone is a ladder to another level. As in previous Mario games, players will have to explore the 30 to 40 stages using their imaginations. They're definitely going to be exploring a lot of those levels with their imaginations because the final game is only going to have 15 levels. No, and Bill Preston in chat is saying that it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Every subsequent Mario game on a console has been good, but none of them will ever do what this game did for gaming. No, that's not an exaggeration at all. Honestly, it's kind of a fluke in the evolution of game design theory that Super Mario 64 came out at the moment that it did. Because logically, if you were to look at this logically, Super Mario 64 could have very easily been New Super Mario Bros. And New Super Mario Bros. Is a game that came out in 2004 for the Nintendo DS, New Super Mario Bros. Was built on it's a 2D platformer Super Mario Bros. Game built using Super Mario 64's engine in modified form to make a 2D game instead of a 3D game. So New Super Mario Bros. Gives us a very accurate look at what a 2D Mario platformer using polygonal character models and graphics could have been like on Nintendo 64. Now, if they wanted to be conservative, Super Mario 64 could have just been New Super Mario Bros. just taking Super Mario World and upgrading the graphics using the ability to produce polygons, but having the same gameplay style as the 2D Mario game. If they wanted to be ambitious about it, Super Mario 64, at best, should have basically been what we eventually got with Super Mario 3D Land on the Nintendo 3DS in 2011. Because Super Mario 3D Land is a linear point A to point B platformer game where you're guiding Mario in a 3D environment that is linear with a point A to point B progression with no free roaming camera, no free roaming exploration. The fact that they went straight from Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island to having this free roaming sandbox 3D world in Mario 64 at a time when your competition is going to be things like Crash Bandicoot, which is like sort of a corridor 3D platform, is kind of extraordinary. It's kind of a fluke of the history of game design. Now, Azurest is in chat is saying that they always felt like some of the mirrors should have gone to different levels. Maybe they originally did. We'll play Mario 64 at some point, but there is one area in Princess Peach's castle that has a mirror in it. And in the mirror, you could see Lakitu, who's operating the camera. He's the in-game contextualization for the camera, and you normally can't see him because you're seeing the game through his camera lens. And you see him holding the camera and flying around Mario. And in the reflection of the mirror, you could see something against one of the walls of the room that doesn't exist in real life. And if you jump into that spot, you will be able to access a new level. So they actually do use that idea to hide some of the game worlds in Mario 64. But it's time for another 5-minute break. I'll get up, stretch, refill my water bottle, and in addition to all of that, run an ad, some ads so they don't interrupt our gameplay. We're about 30% through this magazine. I think we're going to end up reading most, if not all, of this magazine, even if it takes up the rest of the stream, because this has been an absolutely incredible experience, and I'm actually learning a lot more and having a lot more fun. I mean, I expected to have fun, or else why would I be doing this? But it's been an amazing time, and more so than I expected. So I'll see you all in 5 minutes, and we'll continue the magazine reading then.
The journey's just begun. Pokemon, more the better. Pokemon, Team Rocket's on the run. Pokemon, we're friends forever. You've got the power right in your hands. They'll evolve before your eyes. A world of magic at your command. You can be a master if you try. Pokemon.
Mic. Okay, there we go. Doggone. Okay. Only 20% of the game was mapped out for the Shoshinkai version. Can you hear me now? Hello? 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 Alright. Hold on. Can anyone else hear me? Hold on, I have to test something with my phone. Alright, we're good. Now, ironically, I had to press mute for a second in order to test if I was not muted. But, yeah, I think for a few seconds I might have muted the mic when I dropped it. Okay, anyway. Well, I didn't drop it, it fell off my desk. But, yeah, only 20% of the game was mapped out for the Shoshinkai version. But even so, we saw many areas. The opening world consists of a castle and grounds surrounding it. Although the main part of the game lies within the castle, from which you can warp to many other places, you can explore the countryside surrounding the castle as well. For instance, you can jump in the moat surrounding the castle and swim around, looking for hidden treasures or just for fun. The amazing thing is that it's fun to just mess around, whether swimming or climbing trees or whatever, because the play control and animation are so realistic, it's like being in another world. Now, I do remember specifically spending a lot of time in the outdoor castle courtyard area in Mario 64 and just exploring it and imagining like that as I just wandered around, just messing around in this garden, that I was like in a garden in like a virtual reality world, like, you know, where like I was actually like kind of like a Matrix type thing, where my game was like, my brain was like in the world of the computer program. And then when you get 10 stars, the courtyard gets infested with booze, and it becomes a dangerous place. And I was like, oh, what happened to my special safe place I used to run around in? Now it's infested with ghosts, actual enemies that could harm me. Like, what the heck? So that stink. But anyway, inside the castle, Mario discovers warp zones behind closed doors. Once Mario steps into the warp, he's transported to another place or course. The object is to pass through every course, finding all the secrets along the way. In the first course alone, you climb a tower, slide into a pool, dodge swamps, battle a giant piranha plant, discover a hidden cannon that switches you to a first-person cannon aiming mode before blasting Mario up to a flagpole, and more. Behind door number 2, Mario is warped to an icy world where a mother penguin protects a brood of baby birds. The course contains a series of ice slides that carry you ever downward, but you must look for hidden surprises even on a bonus slide that's like a giant luge run where Mario must collect coins. Another world contains a courtyard of boo buddies, and another features hot lava bubbling beneath a grid of shifting islands where Mario must jump with precision. The story for the game is still in development, but Mario is the main character and Bowser appears as the arch nemesis. Mr. Miyamoto says that Yoshi doesn't show up in this game. One surprise is that Mario has more strength than ever before. In fact, he has the strength of 8 plumbers. A new power meter with ratings up to 8 give Mario a fighting chance against the enhanced 64-bit enemies who now haunt his steps. Power-ups refill this circular meter to keep Mario in the game. Players can bring up an inset map as well to check on Mario's position and make strategic decisions. Did you? No, I don't think in the final version of the game, I don't think there was an inset, like an option to bring up a little mini map in the corner. I know other N64 games had this. I don't see that in any of these screenshots, and I don't think that was in the final game. Now, a version of that did come out on the 64, Mario 64 remake for the DS. Your entire lower screen was a giant map, but that's a different story. Now, Mario is a 3D figure created from hundreds of texture-mapped polygons, but he doesn't have the blocky, sharp-edged look of a Virtua Fighter. At the closest camera zoom, Mario consists of 1,500 polygons. Since the Nintendo 64 is so powerful, the large number of polygons doesn't affect... I have to scroll up to here. Yeah, it looks like they're talking about over here. They're talking about a beta version of Whomp's Fortress, which ended up being the second level of the game. Rendering speed, and the screen can be filled with equally detailed backgrounds, objects, and enemies. We noted 5 or 6 enemies as large as Mario moving about the screen at once. In addition to the solid objects, the shifting lighting effects and shadows that appear in the game are some of the most impressive computer-generated effects we've seen. Imagine a game as realistic as the Toy Story movie that you actually control. Really, that wouldn't come about, like, if this is like 5th generation of this, if this is the 5th generation of consoles, we really wouldn't see Toy Story level real-time graphics until the 7th or 8th generation, really. But so calling these Toy Story level graphics is kind of an overstatement. But we certainly have gotten to a point where, like, this is January 96. By 2000, we had the Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within movie come out as a Hollywood release that with, like, some A-list talent, doing the voice work for it. And by the time, like, if you look at Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 4, that is, like, obviously, like, surpasses the visuals of Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. And we have some activity in chat. Bill is saying they remember seeing Toy Story and Final Fantasy VIII cutscenes and thinking, there's no way we'll ever have video games that look as good as that you could control. Mecha Kong is saying that they reached Pixar levels with Ratchet and Clank on the PS3? Yeah, because that's 7th generation, and that's about what I said. And with, on PlayStation 5, we absolutely, if you look at the Ratchet and Clank game on that system, we absolutely have surpassed it. Azure was saying, yeah, he's just stating how blown his mind is. Because this is an absolutely mind-blowing, sort of leap in what could be done in a game. Now, speaking of control, Mario runs, walks, squats, jumps. No, he walks, jumps, squats, whirls, slides, swims, climbs, flips, soars, and waves his arms and hoots with joy. A Nintendo 64 controller is perfectly adapted to Mario's range of motion. The control stick guides his movement and speed through 360 degrees, while the jump button sends him bounding into or out of trouble. He can pick up objects using the B button, alter the camera view using the 4 C buttons, and bring up the inset map with the left and right buttons. Yeah, that didn't end up happening in the fun game. Excuse me. The only element that can throw you at first is the necessity of changing camera angles in a 3D world from time to time. Even the title screen of Mario 64 is fun. As a means of learning how to manipulate the control stick, players can mess with Mario on the opening screen. It may look as if Mario is simply waiting to get started on the game, but you can pull or tweak his nose in 360 degrees and elicit different responses. Ouch, it's so good it hurts. So we have Pilot Wings. This is a game, I have not played this game since 1998 at the latest. I know Pilot Wings 64 was certainly the first Nintendo 64 game that I rented, and the first N64 game I played aside from Mario 64. I remember this very specifically. Yeah, Mr. Audrey was not there for it, but I do remember the very specific memory. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, very specific memory where one day, my mom, she took me to Blockbuster, and it was the first time we went to Blockbuster in this region, since we moved. And we rented we've got a tape of the Eddie Murphy remake of The Nutty Professor, along with Mario 64, and Mom made falafel for the first time that I specifically remember it, and she got pita bread, and so we ate falafel and pita, and I played Pilot Wings 64, and my mind was blown, and then we watched the Nutty Professor movie. And, very specific memory. The first time I rented a video game. And the first time I specifically remember eating falafel. Nintendo joins forces with Paradigm Simulation Inc., the leading developer of realistic simulation programs and 3D graphics, for the creation of Pilot Wings 64. Shigeru Miyamoto of Nintendo, who designed the original Pilot Wings for the Super NES, also helped with the development of the game. Pilot Wings 64 will be a showcase of 3D marvels, including a virtual flight across the United States. Missions in Pilot Wings 64 vary in complexity and the type of aircraft players fly. Gone are the floating target balloons. Instead, more realistic missions require flyers to glide through canyons or make pinpoint landings on mountaintops, using the control stick to guide the different types of craft, which include planes, gliders, choppers, and jetpacks. Players complete a series of missions that take them completely across the USA. Of course, even in a massive game such as this, Nintendo couldn't simulate every mile of the Continental Crossing. Instead, stages featured landmarks such as Chicago's skyline or the St. Louis Arch. In fact, Mount Rushmore gets an additional face in this game, a notable visage with a thick mustache. Alright, so that's the... Yeah, and from what I remember, Azure asked, I don't think my mom made tabbouleh on that day, just the falafel and the pita. And she didn't make it in the sort of little meatball style falafel, she made it in a patty kind of style, so it could fit inside the pita. Yeah, but Zelda 64. The video demo of The Legend of Zelda 64 surprised everyone at Shoshinkai. The surprise came not from the quality of the animation, which was excellent, but from the announcement that The Legend of Zelda 64 would be one of the first disc-based games for the Nintendo 64. No release date was given for Zelda 64, but the game will be shown at next year's Shoshinkai along with the 64DD disc drive accessory. And yeah, the 64DD ended up coming out in like 2000 or 2001 as a Japan exclusive that you had to like get through by paying for a subscription to RandNet, a Japanese-only online service, and they never even brought it to the United States, and Zelda was never released for it. At this point, Zelda exists only as a few animation files, but all of that will change once development on Super Mario 64 is completed. At that time, Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of the previous Zelda games, and Takeshi Tezuka of Yoshi's Island fame will step into the director and producer's chairs. Nintendo's creative giants wouldn't comment specifically on how the 64DD would be used in Zelda, but they mentioned several disc uses in general terms, including the ability to save many games and customize many game elements. For now, all you can do is admire the graphics in the demo. In the 10 seconds or so of footage, Link battles a knight in a shiny metal suit of armor. Both Link and the knight slash at each other with their swords, and the camera moves around the duelers. I believe the term would be duelists, but whatever. In the end, Link follows a feint and a roundhouse, with a roundhouse swing of his mighty shining sword. And they do mention shining to emphasize... Man, look at the... Yeah, this is the first look at what eventually became Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Link looks very different than how he looks in the final game. So Mario Kart 64R, we have Wave Race, Shadows of the Empire. Now Shadows of the Empire, I can tell you some memories of Shadows of the Empire, is that I grew up, if you don't know what the RCA CED video disc format is, look that up. But because when I grew up, I watched Star Wars on CED, on this big giant, like, it's not a laser disc, it's a very different kind of thing, that actually read off of a stylus. It was a giant disc inside a cartridge. And that's how I watched Star Wars, and the television that we used to watch our CED movies on was a television whose screen is maybe half the size of my monitor here. So, from the Masters of Sci-Fi Adventure at LucasArts, Shadows of the Empire, which will be published by Nintendo, features a Star Wars setting and multiple genres of gameplay. Now, my memories of Shadows of the Empire is that when the Star Wars special editions were coming out, it was really the first time in a very long time that you could go to a theater and watch the Star Wars movies. So my mom, and I didn't ask for this was my mom's idea. Thank you, Mom. My mom decided it would be a good idea to take me to see Star Wars. And so we saw, the original Star Wars, A New Hope, or just Star Wars as we called it back in the day before, we had the prequels and all that to really differentiate them. We just called them Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. We didn't really refer to them as their episode names. That was just kind of a formal, sort of decorative aspect of how the movies were presented, but it's not how we referred to the movies at the time, by their episode numbers. But my mom took me to see, it was after school, my mom took me to go see Star Wars at a theater that I know for sure is definitely closed by now. She took me to see Star Wars Special Edition. And then, on the way back home, she took me to Pizza Hut. No, we went to Blockbuster and we rented Shadows of the Empire for Nintendo 64, which I think was like the third N64, the second N64 game I ever rented. And then we went to Pizza Hut that had the kids meal, like Star Wars tie-in, and they were out of the toys. So what they gave us instead was like a voucher to get like a free Micro Machine Star Wars like set of toys. So she took me to Star Wars and I got like the Star Wars Micro Machines. And and we also like ended up getting Star Wars curtains. And mind you, I was not a big Star Wars fan, But my mom was like, you know what? Like, I'm fully immersing my son in this world and the toys and the video games, and I'm glad she did. And I remember, like, on the way home from the movie, I remember like while we're on the between the theater and Pizza Hut, she was explaining like what I thought of them, because I'd seen Star Wars before, but I guess this is the first time I was really old enough to start to like understand it in detail and analyze it. And she was talking about like how like the rebels were standing up, like the Empire was the government, but they were abusing people and they were abusing their authority and disrespecting people's rights. So the people, like, you know, got together and were fighting against the government. And it was a very, like, you know, the idea of just like, you know, how like democracy becomes a dictatorship, and then rebels come and, you know, try to make it a democracy again, and just the fight between liberty and tyranny and everything, and these ongoing cycles of war, peace, and revolution. It was a very it's something that made an impression on me at the time, and probably better prepared for the modern day than I otherwise would have been. We have Body Harvest here, our first screenshots of Star Fox 64, Kirby Bowl 64 here. Eventually ended up becoming Kirby's Air Ride for N64, and then got canceled. And it was revived later on as a GameCube game. So what? Okay. I did not realize that GoldenEye was being discussed this early in the N64's lifespan, because GoldenEye here ended up becoming an important game in the N64's history. Ended up selling a lot of systems. Okay. Boogie. Let's see what this game is. Angel Studios, better known for its contributions to the movies and music videos than video games. But all that is about to change with a little assistance from NCL, which, you know, NCL is Nintendo Company Limited. You could basically, on a casual basis, people would probably call them NOJ, or Nintendo of Japan, but formally, like, there's Nintendo Company Limited, and then Nintendo of America, Nintendo, you know, and so forth are the actual, like, satellite companies. So NCL Angel is putting together an impressive game in which you are a buggy in a thoroughly buggy world. One of the interesting aspects of the game is that buggies are subject to all sorts of dynamic forces such as wind, gravity, anti-gravity, tornadoes, and traction on different surfaces and slopes. Players will be able to customize their buggies with interchangeable components such as engines, tires, and special features, including futuristic weapons. An adjustable camera will allow players to admire their buggies from a wide range of angles, like they'll be used to in Super Mario 64. That's kind of a little bit of bad writing there, just a tad. But okay. Okay, so with that mention that Bill was saying earlier about a DNA-based driving game, when the vehicles would morph and gain powers, because the thing is, that made me imagine like actual bugs that were racing. But now, like, with context, I understand that they're talking about like dune buggies, like, so creator. Yeah, they're talking about 64DD stuff. Now, Blast Dozer. This is a game that ended up being released as Blast Core for the Nintendo 64, a game I do intend to play on stream eventually, but a Rare Limited has stunned the world with its incredible rendered graphics for Donkey Kong Country, DKC2, and Killer Instinct. Now the magicians are doing it again for the Nintendo 64. Blast Dozer is just one of the first titles in works in Triquas. Yeah, I think they're Triquas. Triquas? I know it's probably, that looks like a Welsh name, so I'm guessing Triquas. The idea of Blastozer is that you are roaring through a city or rural landscape in a powerful high-speed bulldozer knocking everything out of your path in a race against time. Why would you be doing this? According to our rare contacts, they're still working on that one. Yeah, they ended up deciding that there's a out-of-control truck with a nuclear warhead on board, and you have to smash everything out the way in order to avoid a nuclear catastrophe. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. Okay, alright. Here, this is gonna be good. For Virtual Boy, Hudson Soft's Virtual Bomberman recreates the excitement of Bomberman in 3D. Athena's Virtual Bowling, Virtual Mahjong from VAP. Bandai's Dimension Wars and Polygo Block from T&E Soft all debuted at the show. Bound High from Japan System was one featured game that rocked. New Game Boy titles included Tokyo Disneyland, The King of Fighters, and a fun little RPG called Pocket Monster from Nintendo. Yep, they just how the world has changed. And just the idea, it is so strange. Like, from my perspective, like, Pokemon did not come out until September 98 in North America. So the fact that on the beginning of the year of the Nintendo 64's release, a fun little RPG called Pocket Monster from Nintendo is the only mention of Pokemon at Space World. And we move on to Super NES coverage. Because remember, like, this is still the Super NES era. This is January. And Super NES is still the frontline console for Nintendo. It's in its lame duck period. Its successor has been named and is scheduled to come on the market. But, yeah, that is amazing. That is amazing. Okay. Yeah, Revolution X. Yeah, an Aerosmith sort of target shooter, like funhouse shooter type game where you're shooting CDs at robots or something. I heard it wasn't that good. Mutant Chronicles Doom Troopers. Lock and load. The mega corporations have introduced a new incentive program, and you're in for a big bonus. Yeah, you have so it's not only sort of previews of games, this is still the point where detailed walkthroughs and strategy guides. Yeah, they dropped a heavy hint towards Pokemon, but the idea that at this point, it was far, far from certain that Nintendo would even attempt to market Pocket Monster outside of Japan. So it could have very well been the case that brief little mention of this little game would end up being all that the West would see of that. Because there was definitely some very detailed discussions being had as to whether or not Pokemon would even be marketable in the United States. So the best of 1995. So number 1, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. Killer Instinct, Yoshi's Island. Now, mind you, I've never played Donkey Kong Country 2. I never even beat the first one. But I think that Yoshi's Island ought to be above any Donkey Kong Country game. But that's my personal bias because I love it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Chrono Trigger, never played it. Sadly, probably never will. Just because there are too many games to play. Earthworm Jim 2, Civilization, another one I never played before. Doom. The only Doom game I've actually played myself Diddy Kong's Quest is incredible. Okay, no, we're gonna play the Donkey Kong Country games eventually, and I know very specifically the magazines I want to see, because my memories of the Donkey Kong Country games are, well, especially with the first one, is looking at these magazines, and not Nintendo Power, because mind you, I'm a Sega kid at this point. All right, around the at the time, like when I first saw pictures of N64, my first thought was like Nintendo's ripping off Sega by trying to make their new system look more like the Genesis. That was my first honest impression of the Nintendo 64. I didn't understand the benefits of N64. I was a Sega loyalist kid at the time. I didn't turn my nose up at Nintendo, but yeah, I was Team Sega at the time. But I remember seeing the screenshots of Sega CD games. And especially at this point, seeing screenshots of Sega 32X games and of games on like these expensive CD-based system like Philips CDI and the 3DO, and the Atari Jaguar was on the market by this point, and thinking, why are these expensive 64 and 32-bit super systems that they want me to buy into, but this Donkey Kong game for the Super Nintendo looks better than that, and it doesn't even use the booster chip that Star Fox used. That was my thought at the time, and I did not own a Super NES until 2001. And at the time, my thought is like, when I got my Super NES in October 2001, my thought was like, wow, I got this old retro system, I'm going to play these old games. But at the time, that was really the equivalent of buying a PlayStation 4 now, which is really scary to think about in terms of how old the system was. So, only a few years later, I finally got to play Donkey Kong Country, and I appreciated it, but I was more into... But I really want to look at the magazines that were covering Donkey Kong Country, making me ask, why do they want me to buy into these expensive new systems when Nintendo's doing has better looking games than these systems? Then it's actually Diddy Kong Quest, not Diddy Kong's Quest. Mecha Kong Chat is saying they're convinced it's a Berenstain versus Berenstein Bears situation. Oh, you know what? I'm not handy to look this up right now. Actually, I'm not handy to look this up right now and do it on stream. But if you look up an arcade game called Berenstain Bears in Big Paw's Cave, and this game looks like a fake game that would be made nowadays as part of like a horror ARG. It does not look like... It is such a weirdly unsettling, unnerving, and creepy game. And it's based on the Berenstain Bears. And one of the things that I remember from when I saw this game is that like the screen will go black. And there'll be this bold message and these huge pixelated letters. And it will say, and it says, keep something to the effect of keep running. It says like, the bats only get meaner. Keep running. And it is just so ominous and creepy. But anyway, how am I talking about the Berenstain? Oh yeah, because chat. Okay, all right. But we have Donkey Kong Land for Game Boy. I have a copy of that. A dear friend of mine gave it to me. I never played through it yet. You have Virtual Boy Wario Land. The first 3D video game system showed some real depth in its debut season. So we have here Wario Land and Mario's Tennis, Golf, Galactic Pinball, and Red Alarm as the 5 best Virtual Boy games. Now, this is like 70%, like this is like, no joke, this might be about 50% of the Virtual Boy's total library. Because this system came out and basically fell flat on its face. This is basically the Virtual Boy should not have come out. It should have been a prototype that got scrapped before they put it to market, sadly. But I'm proud to, speaking out of character, I am proud to live in a timeline in which the Virtual Boy did come to market, though I wish it did not, like, cause the late Gunpei Yokoi to leave Nintendo in disgrace. We now have, and it's kind of unfortunate that basically, within a year or two of the failure of the Virtual Boy and Nintendo and Gunpei Yokoi's, who invented the D-pad control system for that we saw in the NES controllers and lots of video game controllers aside from Nintendo. He developed lots of toys for Nintendo in their pre-video game days, and he was the mastermind behind the Game Boy. Yeah, okay. Bill Preston is correcting me. Don't waste time. The bats get meaner. Yeah, it's like it's just a really unsettling message. Now, did you have to look that up, or did you know that from memory? And if you looked up footage of that game, am I alone? That game feels like a game that someone would make nowadays as part of a horror ARG, and to make it even better / worse, it was released as an arcade game. And Bill in chat is saying they had to look up that game up, and why is that game so creepy looking? And no, the fact that it's an arcade game makes it even better, because it's like, oh, I was at a pizza place one time and I saw this really weird, unsettling, creepy Berenstain Bears video game, and then the next time I went to that pizza place, it was like a place with like Pac-Man or Galaga or something, and I never saw it again. So it's like, how could you manage to make a Berenstain Bears game be so unsettling? Well, but anyway, we've got a 90, a Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Country calendar. I don't know this. I'm not into baseball games, but for a Super NES game, if I was this for a Super NES game, this doesn't look at a very far off from how fully 3D polygonal baseball games would come to look in the PlayStation era. All right. So got. Oh, this is cool. So, so this is how if you're writing and creating the music for video games back in 1995, this is what your setup would look like. You got your monitor. It looks like there might be a second monitor. You got your PC. You've got a keyboard here that's probably set up, and you have all kinds of synth and stereo equipment. And you've got codes and passwords. And, you have a code here for Castlevania Dracula X, which is the inferior Super Nintendo version of Castlevania Rondo of Blood. But if you only had Nintendo, this is a way you could play the game. You know, it was acceptable, but the version on NEC's console was said to be much better, much more reflective of the original intention for how the game should look and sound and play. We have Sparkster, not to be confused with Rocket Knight Adventures. Rocket Knight Adventure. Just the one adventure. Just the one. Yeah, I forgot which. It's like Sparkster is on Super NES, and then Rocket Knight Adventure is on Sega Genesis. And I keep and like one is a sequel to the other, and I keep forgetting which is which. I keep forgetting which game came first. Mortal Kombat 3. Round 1, round 3. Round 2, Mean Streets. Round 4, Enter the Dragon. Yes, we got a lot of player's guide type coverage. Okay. Oh, Tetris Blast. This is a Tetris game that I never... There was a version of this for Game Boy, but I never played it. I never encountered it. I know if my mom had gotten her hands on a cartridge of this game, I wouldn't have often had the chance to play it. And for some strange reason, there was this trend in the 90s, and I guess it might be North America specific, of releasing attempted sequels to Tetris that somehow would include bombs. Because there was a game called Tetris 2 for Game Boy and NES that had bombs in it. And then there's also, separately from that, Tetris Blast. Yeah, so it looks like we have, like, actual puzzle solving here. Because, yeah, Tetris, its genre, is a puzzle game. But, like, I mean a puzzle game in the sense of having to clear the board using a limited number of moves that you have to think your way through. Yeah, for some reason they were just fascinated with coming out with games that attempted sequels to Tetris that somehow involved bombs. And I think there was a Japan exclusive Famicom Tetris game that's separate from Tetris Blast and from Tetris 2 that also did have... I don't know why I'm like fogging on it. That has bombs in it. Yeah, but Yoshi's Island. How do I use the deflating red balloons? Yeah, we don't want to... I haven't played through Yoshi's Island since 2002, so I'm as close to being completely fresh on that game as I possibly can be. And I'm gonna tell you something. Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo is something that if we get through my list of games I intend to cover and play, Yoshi's Island on Super Nintendo is a game that we could very well be playing by the end of the year, and I look forward to that. And let's look at the review for Tetris Blast. So Tetris Blast, a puzzle blast that blows the top off of traditional Tetris. Think of Tetris Blast as a variation of the world's best-selling puzzle game, Tetris. It's just as good as Tetris, but adds an extra spark. In fact, it packs quite a bang. The small bombs implanted within the tetrads fuse together when 4 of them are touching, becoming a giant bomb. When a line is filled, the bombs in that line blow. If you have a giant bomb, it will blow away tetrads on other lines, clearing more of your screen. The trick is to blow up huge chunks of your screen all at once. Excellent gameplay is a positive. 2-player option, very fun and addictive. And the negative is that there's no 2-player option on the Super Game Boy adapter for the Super Nintendo. You have a real-time strategy game. War 2410. Zoop. Okay, this is a game. It's a fun game. I played this. This is one of those... Zoop is one of those games I would play on one of the Macintosh computers at the public library around this time. Zoop is a game released by Viacom, and let's see, Zoop for Game Boy is essentially identical to the Super NES game except for the color and music. In Zoop, you control a colored shooter piece in the center of a playfield surrounding you on 4 sides. But, and Mecha Kong is saying, did I know that Zoop has wildly different difficulty depending on the port? I know the Game Boy version of Zoop isn't very impressive. To make Zoop work on a screen that doesn't display in color, they really had to kind of take away a lot of the character and charm I associate with Zoop. The colors and the unique shapes are they what define Zoop to me, and Mecha Kong saying that the Zoop has widely different difficulty depending on the port. And I only played the Macintosh version, which is probably similar to the PC version. I never played any console version of it or Zoop on any other system. I can't even... When's the last time a version of Zoop came out? It's an absolutely dead franchise at this point. I remember at some point, someone I know, maybe it was Pete Dorr? Does Pete Dorr even have a 3D? I don't know. I don't know. Someone I watch, they were not a VTuber, I know that. Someone I watched was streaming Zoop on either the CDI, if there's a version of Zoop on that system, is either CD. I know there's a version of Tetris on CDI that has an absolutely amazing soundtrack, by the way. Look up the CDI Tetris soundtrack. It's amazing. And Mechacon is saying the latest version was on Saturn. Okay, that sounds about right. It was either on Genesis. No, it was either on the CDI or on. Maybe it was on 3DO. It was on CDI, 3DO, or the Jaguar. It was on one of those short-lived so-called super systems that ended up being completely superseded by the N64 and more, even more so by the PlayStation, and even the Saturn ended up outlasting a lot of those systems that were claiming to be the hot new future of gaming, only to sort of fall by the wayside. But I feel like Viacom was trying to like force Zoop down the. It was a great game. I loved it, but I feel like they were trying to force this game down like into the popular consciousness and make it the next Tetris, and it just never happened. So Pack Watch, you've got Mega Man X3. I only played Mega Man X1, and then not too long after we got our PlayStation, we rented Mega Man X4. And the main thing I remember about Mega Man X, and another point we also rented Mega Man 8, but what the main thing I remember about Mega Man X4, I remember in one of like the cutscenes in like the text box, like either Mega Man or Zero says "damn," and that really got my attention. But I don't think that's real. I think maybe they said "darn" and I just misread it somehow. Because I remember that being. So we have Virtual Fishing. Yeah, you can tell it's a freaking Virtual Boy game. Everything's in red and black like it's playing on the Game Boy Night system. But, yeah, so 3D Tetris. This is one of the games that's going to release on the Nintendo Switch Online Virtual Boy. I really hope that somehow you could rig up a way to play these games. There has to be some kind of way for me to stream these games. And I like this anthropomorphic Tetris block here with like hands and legs and the little face on it. I've never noticed. Oh, and that's how they show you what piece is coming next. So we've got 3D Tetris here. And so, yeah. So like this is a game where you drop 3D Tetris. Like these Tetris block characters, I never noticed. Like this, I guess, is the long block. And here's the T block. And Clackaboy's saying they're back. They're at the New Year's Festival. They caved into buying more Labubu items. I know you had a couple of Labubu things I didn't know you were collecting. I didn't, so, like, do you, like, keep your stuff in a box and have a few favorite Labubu things on, like, a shelf? Or do you have, like, a real, like, display case, you know, on, like, merch, like, really, like, show, like, display the collection, like in a glass case or something like that? I mean, like, you know, like one of those. I know people used to do it a lot with like those DVD like cabinet things, where you could like where you can put little items on the shelves instead of like actual DVDs. They still make those cases, but now they're specifically like game cases. But attend the 1996 Electronic Entertainment Expo, E3. Go to E3 in Los Angeles and attend the largest interactive gaming trade show in the world. So yeah, check out all the games for Nintendo's Ultra 64. Hang with the power editors in Nintendo's booth. You can't get in any other way. This show is not open to the public. You can watch it at home on the news, or you can live the experience with Nintendo Power Magazine. Yeah, that would have been an interesting E3 to go to. And this building right here, this convention center is like, if you are a gamer of a certain generation, this particular building, it's a pretty famous, well-known building in Los Angeles. This is basically like what you know as this building is closely associated with getting all your big game news dump. 5 winners get exclusive Power Press kits. 50 winners get Nintendo Power T-shirts. Mega Man X3. We've got Nestor's Funky Bowling for the Virtual Boy. That'll be eventually on the. And Clackaboy's saying they weren't planning on being a Labubu collector. They don't have a display yet, but they dangle one on their car in the rearview mirror up front. I don't have anything on my rearview mirror. Like, I don't know, I feel like anything that dangles too much would be annoying. But we got a Yoshi sweatshirt. I would really actually like that sweatshirt. There was not a lot of Yoshi's Island merchandise. Like, you could not... These shirts were a really cool prize. Because it's easy... It's hard to believe nowadays, but you really could not just go ahead and buy video game shirts and merchandise back then like you can now. I tell people, and it's kind of hard to believe, but there's more Pokemon merchandise available now than there was at the height of Pokemania. And I could say that as someone who lived through, was a Pokemon fan at the height of Pokemania. There's more merchandise available now than back then. So, hey, it's a little past 8, and I actually, even though we only read one of the 3 magazines that I intended to read, we could catch up with the others later. I actually, I think we did good. I think we're gonna go ahead and call it there. And you know what? Let's see. What am I think we're going to go ahead and rate out in a minute. Did they do some movie? I think one of there was an action. I think one of the. I think what movie was it? What movie was it? I believe it was Rush Hour. Either Rush Hour or Rush Hour 2 had like a major action scene that took place in that building. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and soon we're going to raid Chebits, who is, she's an artist who plays games, but today they are doing an art study. They're practicing on drawing hair. And I believe that, hold on. Yeah, I believe that, yeah, I believe they're working from a photograph of themselves. She's a PNG tuber, but she is working with a photograph of herself as the reference for the hair. So we're gonna go ahead and say hi to her, and I'll see you all. Oh yeah, I'll see you all next time, next Saturday, the 7th of February. And thank you all for watching. At 5 p.m. EST, I'll be there, and we'll play more Pokemon.